An overwhelming sense of disbelief washes over the narrator during this dark moment. A blonde maid rushes through a sunlit palace corridor while tightly clutching several heavy books. A shadowed figure calls out to the blonde maid, identifying her by the name Ruru. A green-haired man playfully intercepts Ruru, questioning why she is moving with such great haste. Ruru stops and offers a polite, startled greeting to the flamboyant man blocking her path. The green-haired man watches Ruru intently, his eyes narrowed with a calculating and curious gaze. The man flirtatiously proposes a date, claiming he rejected all other women specifically for her. An unexpected blow from a heavy book strikes the green-haired man squarely on his bat. Startled and in pain, the man demands to know the reason for the sudden physical reprimand. A second green-haired man scolds his brother for bothering Ruru while she is trying to work. Ruru offers a bright, earnest smile while thanking the glasses-wearing man for his protective intervention. The stoic brother remains silent, his expression unreadable as he processes the maid's genuine gratitude. Looking away bashfully, the man deflects Ruru's thanks by claiming his help was merely incidental. A silver-haired man surprises Ruru from behind, wrapping her in a sudden and playful embrace. The silver-haired man mockingly refers to the green-haired brothers as the green grass twins. The silver-haired man gazes at Ruru with a look of intense and somewhat unsettling possessiveness. Ruru awkwardly attempts to excuse herself from the silver-haired man's persistent and clingy behavior. Ruru stands overwhelmed as the three men engage in a loud and chaotic argument over her. A heavy, authoritative footstep echoes through the hall, signaling the arrival of a serious presence. A dark-haired man with a commanding aura approaches the group and silences them for their noise. Ruru is startled as the newcomer sternly questions the questionable behavior of the Holy Four Knights. The formidable, dark-haired man asserts his authority by physically pulling Ruru close to his side. The man warns the others to stop interfering with the maid he identifies as his attendant. Ruru feels exhausted by the ongoing bickering, finding the entire situation completely and utterly unbelievable. Ruru reflects on how these men, who once hated her, have now become strangely obsessive. Bloody memories resurface as Ruru realizes one of these four men was her past life killer. A vision of the dark-haired knight drenched in blood triggers Ruru's deepest suspicions and fears. Fueled by a quiet rage, Ruru vows to uncover the identity of the person who murdered her. Ruru awakens with a start, confused to find herself lying within a flower-filled coffin. From her coffin, Ruru listens as mourners discuss her sudden and suspicious death from illness. Ruru questions the official narrative of her death, certain that she did not die from illness. Hidden voices whisper the dark truth, suggesting that the saint was actually the victim of assassination. The mourners callously slander the deceased saint, labeling her a promiscuous woman with a terrible reputation. Ruru is deeply insulted by the vile, false rumors spread about her conduct within the temple. Ruru remembers her humble and difficult beginnings as a lonely child raised in an orphanage. The image of her small, bare feet serves as a reminder of her former life's hardships. Ruru describes her former role as the saint and guardian of the sacred spirit tree. Despite her orphan status, Ruru ascended to sainthood, embodying purity and immense spiritual power. Resentful noblewomen targeted Ruru with malice and baseless rumors due to her low-born orphan origins. Even her personal guards, the Holy Four Knights, treated the saint with open contempt and neglect. The green-haired brothers were particularly cruel, often targeting her with verbal abuse and snide remarks. Amidst the cruelty of the palace, Ruru found solace and joy by visiting the orphanage children. Ruru cherished her mother's memory, drawing strength from a blue pendant she kept close. Determined to fulfill her duties, Ruru endured every hardship and tried her best as the saint. Ruru stood faithfully before the ancient spirit tree, performing her secret rituals to protect the kingdom. In the quiet of the temple, Ruru allowed herself a moment to weep over her hidden suffering. A sudden act of violent betrayal occurs as a hidden assassin stabs Ruru from the shadows. Overwhelmed by shock and pain, Ruru experiences the final terrifying moments of her first life. On her knees and dying, Ruru finally recalls the grim reality of her brutal and unexpected murder. The truth is finally clear as Ruru rejects the lie of illness, remembering her fatal stabbing. An ominous text box reveals that the fatal incident occurred during a moment of prayer. Bleeding out on the cold floor, the dying saint desperately asks who attacked her. A black-gloved hand callously steals the blue pendant from the dying woman's neck. A sharp visual transition marks the end of her life and the beginning of darkness. Reaching out with a bloodied hand, the saint begs the departing figure to return her keepsake. Ruru reflects on her murder and the theft of her mother's pendant from her coffin. Floating petals surround her as she questions the purpose of her life ending so unjustly. Her blue eyes snap open with a sudden, startling surge of life and renewed awareness. A powerful rejection of her fate echoes through the void as her spirit finally awakens. Sitting up in her coffin, Ruru angrily declares that the story of her death is bullshit. The saint vows to return from the afterlife and curse the culprit for all eternity. A light blue-haired man watches the scene, surprised to hear a saint uttering such heavy curses. The man with long, light blue hair approaches the coffin and simply addresses the awakened woman. Ruru is stunned to find the high priest standing before her after her sudden resurrection. Clutching her chest in disbelief, the confused saint asks if she is truly alive again.
Looking at her with a gentle gaze, the high priest confirms the resurrection ritual succeeded.
He apologizes for his timing but states he has a proposal for her immediately.
The high priest extends his hand toward the startled woman sitting among the white flowers.
He offers his hand, inviting the saint to join him in a secret mutual alliance. Ruru processes the suggestion that she should cooperate with the high priest to find her killer. Narrative boxes describe the high priest as an influential, young, and highly respected figure.
The high priest's extensive knowledge of divine power and his leadership within the temple are highlighted.
Flashbacks reveal that this man was the one who first recognized and nurtured Ruru's abilities. The high priest asks for a moment so he can explain everything that has transpired. He describes the grim moment he discovered her collapsed and bloodied body on the floor. He reveals he performed a forbidden resurrection ritual known only to high priests through generations. Ruru thanks him, but he credits her survival to her own immense store of divine power.
To deceive her enemies, he explains that he falsified her death as a sudden illness. Ruru repeats the word with a look of growing concern, realizing she has unknown enemies.
The high priest confirms she was stabbed, and she remembers the knight's betrayal with a nod. He deduces she was likely attacked with the knight's sword, prompting a dark and bloody vision. Ruru realizes that only the Holy Four Knights can touch those specific sacred swords.
The horrifying truth settles in as she concludes the culprit must be one of the four.
The high priest shares his doubts that the assassination was the work of just one person. He suggests that a mastermind was likely pulling the strings behind the knight who stabbed her.
He warns that a major conspiracy involving nobles or even royalty is likely behind her death. As high priest, he asserts his inability to overlook those who threaten the temple's sanctity. The light blue-haired man claps his hands together to snap Ruru out of her deep thoughts.
Looking determined, Ruru acknowledges his points as she prepares to face her past life killers.
Ruru joyfully realizes that being officially dead grants her the freedom to move about unseen. The duo imagines themselves as investigators shining a bright light on a cowering, shadowy culprit. With a bright and enthusiastic exclamation, Ruru agrees to the high priest's plan for vengeance. Ruru strikes a powerful and determined pose, ready to hunt down the person who murdered her.
The high priest is amused by how quickly she moved from shock to making a decision.
Ruru shouts her commitment to do whatever it takes to achieve their shared goals. She vows to expose the culprit and make them bow in apology 1,000 times. Ruru thinks of her mother's stolen pendant and vows to finally get it back.
The high priest notes that her personality seems to have changed quite a bit since waking.
Ruru feels a sense of liberation, deciding she no longer needs to be a perfect saint. Holding a flag of freedom, she joyfully declares that she will live however she wants. The high priest watches Ruru with a gentle smile as they solidify their secret investigative alliance. Ruru stands in deep contemplation, bracing herself for the dangerous task of hunting her own killer. With a kind expression, the high priest says that her courageous and determined attitude is very reassuring. The high priest instructs Ruru to hide her identity and investigate each of the four knights individually. Ruru touches her chin thoughtfully and asks him for specific details on how to accomplish her mission.
He suggests she change her appearance, become the knight's personal attendant, and infiltrate their inner circle undetected.
Narrative text explains that the Holy Four Knights are revered as the primary idols of the nation. They are described as a gathering of legendary heroes, each distinguished by their exceptional military achievements.
A jubilant crowd of citizens cheers enthusiastically as the famous knights ride through the city streets.
Ruru worries that getting close is frightening and fears the consequences of her true identity being discovered. The high priest announces that he will start by making her the personal attendant of Jaren Lyra. A small, simplified Ruru stands in stunned silence as she processes the high priest's surprisingly bold choice. Ruru reacts with extreme shock and vocal disbelief at the mention of the notoriously cold-hearted knight.
Ruru shouts for him to wait a moment, repeating Jaren Lyrat's name with a look of horror.
Ruru recalls with dread that Jaren was at the absolute top of her list of haters.
Surrounded by dark, thorny roses, Ruru gazes at Jaren's image and internally labels him a death god.
Narrative boxes describe Jaren as a war hero distinguished by his merciless and cold-blooded military accomplishments.
Ruru fears he would kill her instantly while the high priest details her chores from meals to bathing.
The high priest cheerfully tells her that she must focus on gaining the cold knight's trust first. Panicking, Ruru screams that she cannot do it because he will surely kill her all over again.
Smiling, the high priest reminds Ruru of her promise to do anything to achieve her goals. A voice calls out to Jaren, asking why he still does not have a single personal attendant.
In a grand hallway, the green-haired knight walks alongside the stoic and dark-haired Jaren Lyrat. The green-haired man suggests Jaren should get an attendant or a nice girl to make things easier. Jaren asserts he has no need for anyone and will immediately drive away any aspiring attendants. With a cold and blood-spattered gaze, Jaren warns that he will cut down anyone who bothers him. 3 days later, Ruru arrives at the detached palace that serves as the home of Jaren Lyrat. Now disguised with blonde hair, Ruru finds it impossible to calm her nerves before meeting her employer. Ruru trembles at the prospect of serving the terrifying man she once knew as a cold enemy.
She recalls her declaration to Lord Senecus, questioning if she can truly survive such a dangerous mission.
Ruru stands solemnly beside her own empty, flower-filled coffin, reflecting on her past life as the saint. She worries her distinctive hair will expose her, even though her face was previously hidden by a veil.
Chibi Ruru reasons that since the knights previously showed zero interest in her, she might be safe. Veiled Ruru follows Jaren down a hall, remembering how he genuinely hated her during her first life.
Jaren stops suddenly and looks back with a sharp, intimidating glance that immediately startles the disguised Ruru.
Ruru thinks about how a proper saint would ask for an escort before heading into the town.
Ruru stands nervously in the hallway as Jaren turns his body to address her sudden, silent presence.
Jaren commands her to stop trying to read his mood and warns her not to speak.
Jaren looks at her with intense hostility, flatly stating that just looking at her makes him angry.
Chibi Ruru clutches her head in frustration, complaining that his harsh words were completely unnecessary and rude.
The high priest explains that her hair and eye color will naturally change as her divine power fades. Ruru is overjoyed to learn that her hair color will soon change to help hide her identity. The high priest gently reaches out toward Ruru's face as he pauses to continue his detailed explanation. He tells her that she has such beautiful hair color before offering a sincere and quiet apology. The high priest looks down with a solemn and sad expression while contemplating the loss of her beauty.
Ruru looks at him with a wide-eyed and surprised expression, asking why he is apologizing to her.
Touching her hair gently, he claims that losing her hair color is merely a trivial price to pay.
He holds a lock of her purple hair and notes that hair is very important to women.
Ruru gazes at him with a moved and surprised look, realizing his unexpected and deep level of consideration. Narrative boxes describe the high priest as a man possessing both a strong presence and a gentle heart.
Ruru looks at the high priest, noting that he somehow feels like a motherly figure to her.
The high priest is sweat-dropped and confused after Ruru compares him to a doting, apron-wearing mother.
The high priest clears his throat and accepts her choice if she is fine with it, though he remains hesitant.
Ruru asserts that she does not care about hair at all before hinting at a bigger change.
The high priest is puzzled when Ruru suddenly asks him if he has a ceremonial dagger available for use.
Ruru cuts her long hair with the dagger, causing the high priest to scream in utter shock. Floating locks of hair signify the start of her second life and her commitment to the mission. Ruru stands with short hair and a determined expression, ready to go as far as necessary. Wiping his forehead, the high priest expresses his exasperation at her bold and sudden decision-making. Ruru embraces her new look and identity as Jaren Lyrat's attendant, moving on from being a saint. Disguised in blue, blonde-haired Ruru walks toward the palace entrance with a sense of nervous anticipation. Ruru clenches her fist, focusing on her goals of finding the culprit and recovering her pendant. Ruru introduces herself to the closed doors, announcing she has been assigned as Lord Jaran's attendant. Blonde-haired Ruru stands before the ornate palace doors, ready to begin her infiltration as an attendant.
Chibi Ruru stands in confused silence when her announcement is met with no response from the room.
Ruru knocks on the door and introduces herself by name, identifying as the newly appointed palace attendant. The blonde-haired girl waits in front of the silent palace doors, hoping for an answer from Jaren. Chibi Ruru panics, realizing that Jaren should have known she was coming but is still ignoring her. Narrations explain that while knights usually have several attendants, the misanthropic Jaren has refused all of them. Ruru worries that Jaren's lonely lifestyle might mean the interior of his palace is a total mess.
The blonde-haired girl stands outside, fearing that the stubborn knight will simply ignore her visit entirely.
The high priest offers Ruru a master key to the detached palaces, suggesting she use it if needed. Ruru uses the master key to unlock the door, determined to make a strong and energetic impression. Ruru takes a deep breath and prepares to greet the knight with as much energy as possible. The blonde-haired girl kicks the doors open and shouts a greeting to the silent room inside. Stopping suddenly, Ruru wonders what the strange sound coming from inside the dark room could be. Jaren Lyrat appears with a murderous aura, clutching his head and complaining about the excessive noise. Jaren's terrifying gaze makes Ruru realize that her plan to be liked is failing away. Surrounded by thorny vines, Ruru trembles as she faces the prospect of her second death. The dark-haired knight glares down at the trembling Ruru, who fears she might die right then. Ruru tells herself not to give up and prepares to stand her ground against the knight's hostility. Jaren bluntly tells the girl he does not need an attendant and orders her to go home. Ruru begs him to reconsider, promising to be useful if he just allows her to stay there.
Jaren asserts that her presence alone is an annoyance and that she is in his way.
Ruru realizes Jaren has a thick wall around his heart as she observes his cold, distant demeanor. Jaren demands to know how she unlocked the door, while Ruru nervously prepares to explain herself. Ruru shows off the master key from the high priest, but Jaren prepares to take it back. Chibi Ruru is stunned as Jaren's hand reaches out to snatch the key away from her. Jaren slams the palace door shut, leaving a sweat-dropped Ruru standing alone in the hallway. Smirking with newfound resolve, Ruru accepts the challenge and prepares for a battle of endurance. Ruru vows to show her true power as she pushes past her limits to finish her mission. Clenching her fist, Ruru recalls her record for a 24-hour continuous prayer to find her motivation. Narrative text indicates that Ruru continued to persistently visit Jaran's palace every single day. Ruru returns with a basket of apples, cheerfully offering them to Jaran through the palace doors. Ruru pops up from behind a hedge to greet Jaren as he tries to leave his palace. Jaren is shocked to find Ruru waiting for him again with an enthusiastic greeting. Jaren leans against a pillar near a silver-haired boy who sits on a bench eating cookies.
The dark-haired knight clutches his forehead, looking completely exhausted by Ruru's relentless and daily visits.
The silver-haired boy comments on Ruru's daily attacks while Jaren imagines her as a persistent dog.
The silver-haired boy notes they are free until the next saint is chosen after the previous death.
The silver-haired boy cheekily suggests that Jaren should simply hire the girl as his attendant.
Eating a cookie, the boy mentions rumors of the saint's assassination amid a backdrop of blood. Jaren gazes downward with a somber expression, seemingly lost in deep and troubled thought. While the boy snacked, Jaren internally decided he has no intention of keeping anyone close to him. Jaren believes that being involved with someone like him would not benefit the girl anyway. The silver-haired boy continues eating his cookie while contemplating the situation with a mysterious look. Looking smugly at the camera, the silver-haired boy considers Jaren to be quite a pain. A sudden downpour drenches the palace, forcing a surprised Jaren to pull his cloak over his head. Jaren looks intense and alert as he notices something unexpected near a carriage in the rain. Jaren is stunned to find the blonde-haired Ruru standing alone on the steps in the rain. Soaked to the bone, Ruru looks up with a hopeful smile and calls out to Lord Jaren. Jaren looks at her in disbelief, asking if she has been standing there wet the entire time. The scene shifts as the two stand on the grand steps of the palace amidst the rain. Ruru explains that she came specifically to deliver a letter she received from the high priest. Despite the cold, Ruru smiles cheerfully while holding the letter she wanted to deliver personally.
Jaren reaches for the dry envelope as Ruru's hand trembles from the cold and her nerves.
Having finished her errand, Ruru begins to walk away, promising to return to her dormitory. Ruru turns back with a determined look, shouting that she will come back again soon.
Jaren stares after her with a conflicted and pained expression, his mouth drawn into a tight line.
Surrounded by sparkling white flowers, Jaren suddenly shouts for her to wait before she leaves.
Jaren grabs Ruru by the shoulder, startling her as he stops her from departing in the storm.
Jaren looks at her with concern, stating he wouldn't throw a soaked woman out into this downpour. Softening his stance, Jaren tells Ruru to come inside to escape the relentless rain. Jaren leads her to a bathroom, telling her to heat bathwater and use the towels provided. Jaren instructs Ruru to leave once she is warmed up, while she responds with a nervous stutter. Standing in the grand bathroom, Ruru reflects on how she never expected to enter the palace this way. Ruru gazes at Jaren's image, wondering if the cold knight actually possesses a kind and caring side. Shivering from the cold, Ruru decides to take him up on the offer to avoid getting sick.
Ruru places a hand over her chest where the ornate sacred mark of a saint glows faintly.
Narrative boxes explain the mark appears for saints and cannot be hidden, making Ruru fear exposure. Ruru begins to undress for her bath, carefully pulling the sleeve of her gown down her arm. Jaren pulls back the curtain to offer a change of clothes, completely unaware Ruru is undressed in.
Both characters freeze in absolute shock as Jaren accidentally walks in on the partially undressed Ruru.
Panic seizes Ruru as she realizes Jaren might have seen the sacred mark on her chest. The two stand in awkward silence in the bathroom as Ruru desperately tries to cover herself. Ruru finally reacts with a loud, embarrassed scream, her face flushed with shock and anger. Jaren panics and shouts an apology while waving his hands in a frantic attempt to explain himself. Jaren quickly tosses the clean clothes into the room and flees to leave Ruru in peace.
Alone, Ruru clutches her chest in terror, fearing Jaren now knows her true identity as the saint.
Now dressed in an oversized shirt, Ruru laments that her secret might have been exposed already. Ruru imagines a chibi Jaren chasing her with a sword for barging in and taking a bath. Clutching her head, Ruru complains that imagining the worst-case scenario is giving her a massive headache. As Ruru walks away, Jaren calls out to her, causing her to jump in sudden fright. Ruru turns around with a wide-eyed panicked expression, fearing the knight has discovered her secret. Jaren rubs his head and apologizes again for his lack of consideration during their earlier encounter. Framed by roses, Jaren admits it has been a long time since he hosted a guest. Ruru frantically waves her hands to dismiss his apology, her voice trembling with lingering anxiety. Ruru's heart sinks as Jaren mentions seeing a scar on her chest, confirming her worst fear. Jaren observes that having a noticeable mark like that must be quite difficult for a woman. Jaren promises Ruru that he will not tell anyone about the mark, offering her some reassurance. Ruru's eyes widen as she realizes Jaren has completely mistaken the sacred mark for a simple scar. Internal narration confirms Ruru's relief that the knight remains unaware of her true identity as the saint. Ruru observes the distant knight, surprised to find he is actually capable of being quite considerate. Ruru struggles to reconcile Jaren's terrifying reputation with the unexpectedly kind person standing before her now. The blonde-haired girl stammers nervously as she tries to find the right words to speak to him. Ruru expresses her deep gratitude to Jaren for promising to keep her supposed scar a secret. An awkward and heavy silence falls between the two as they stand alone in the quiet room. Flushed with intense embarrassment, Ruru shouts a frantic apology for the earlier encounter in the bathroom. Breaking the tension, the dark-haired knight bluntly asks the girl if she is feeling hungry. Jaren firmly tells her to follow him, surprising the girl as he leads her elsewhere. Ruru sits alone at an incredibly long dining table, feeling dwarfed by the massive, ornate room. Narrations explain that Jaren lives alone in the grand mansion after he suddenly brought her there. Sitting in the quiet dining hall, the girl takes a moment to observe her pristine surroundings curiously.
A somber image of the deceased saint appears as the girl reflects on those who came before.
Seeing how clean everything is, Ruru wonders if the knight manages all the difficult housework by himself.
Text highlights the immense prestige of the Lyrat ducal house, second in power only to the royalty.
Ruru finds it hard to believe that the eldest son of such power handles everything alone.
Wearing an apron, Duran serves her a tray and apologizes for offering her only leftovers. Ruru stares in awe at the steaming bowl of stew and freshly sliced bread before her.
The blonde-haired girl looks up with shimmering eyes, stunned that the high-ranking knight cooked for her. Jaren confirms her suspicion while Ruru looks on with wide-eyed amazement and starts to eat. The knight explains his paranoia, noting that leaving food preparation to others invites the risk of poison.
Ruru prepares to take a bite, politely thanking the knight for providing her with a warm meal. The girl takes a spoonful of the stew, her expression showing her immediate and deep appreciation. Sparkling with delight, Ruru remains speechless for a moment as she experiences the flavor of the food. Enthusiastically jumping from her seat, the girl loudly proclaims that the knight's cooking is absolutely delicious. Jaren looks at her with a conflicted expression, unsure how to properly respond to her sudden outburst.
Observing her energetic and earnest behavior, the knight internally compares the blonde girl to a friendly puppy.
Jaren sighs and clutches his forehead, realizing he cannot ignore her when she is in need.
The dark-haired knight reflects on how foolish it is becoming to keep trying to push her away.
A ghostly image of the former saint looms, highlighting the lingering memories that haunt the knight. Jaren's hand trembles as he reaches out, seemingly unsettled by a sudden and deep-seated realization.
Comparison text flows as the knight notes how much the girl resembles someone from his troubled past.
Leaning in close, Jaren asks to see her face more clearly as he stares at her intensely.
The girl freezes as the knight gently cups her chin, his sudden proximity catching her off guard.
Ruru shouts in shock at the sudden contact, causing both of them to pull away in surprise. Duran looks away dismissively, denying any specific intent behind his sudden and forward behavior toward her. The empty plate stands as a testament to how quickly the girl finished the knight's meal.
Ruru remains quiet and pensive, questioning the meaning behind the knight's strange and sudden behavior earlier.
Watching Jaren, Ruru admits she never expected to see such a caring and gentle side to him.
Ruru is motivated to bridge the distance between them until a sudden, shocking thought interrupts her planning. GB Ruru panics, realizing Jaren's superior housekeeping and cooking skills make her role as an attendant redundant.
Frantic and dizzy, the girl laments that she is currently the one being taken care of instead.
Ruru bows deeply and loudly thanks the knight once more for the food she just enjoyed.
With renewed energy, she apologizes for being a burden and declares her intent to prove her worth.
Looking like an eager puppy, she begs for a chance to repay his kindness through hard work. Jaren stands up and tells her she won't be cooking, much to the girl's sudden surprise. Walking away, the knight finally yields and tells her he will allow her to handle the cleaning.
Ruru's eyes light up with joy as he mentions she might be asked to handle laundry too. Jaren clarifies that this is only a trial period and not a permanent hire for an attendant. Jaren informs the girl she may start tomorrow and promises that he will be waiting.
The blonde-haired girl beams with an ecstatic smile while loudly thanking the knight for the opportunity. Suddenly, the girl's feet slip in her slippers as she begins to lose her physical balance. Reaching out a hand in desperation, the girl stumbles as consciousness begins to fail her. The girl falls backward into the air, her vision spinning as she succumbs to total exhaustion.
Narrative text explains that her sudden lightheadedness and fatigue hit her all at once after relaxing. Jaren shouts in alarm as he sees the girl suddenly collapse right in front of him.
The knight quickly lunges forward and catches the falling girl by the arm and shoulder. Amidst a backdrop of white flowers, Jaren holds the unconscious girl in a dramatic, protective embrace. The knight looks down at the girl's sleeping face with a look of quiet, pensive concern.
Blue petals fall around the pair as the knight stands alone in the grand dining hall.
Duran observes her face closely, noting the girl's striking resemblance to someone from his troubled past. A bright memory of a short-haired girl smiling in a sunny flower field briefly flashes by.
Leaning in, Duran thinks he needs a better look at her face to confirm his suspicions. The girl's eyes snap open in shock as she finds the knight's face inches from hers.
The two lock eyes in a tense, silent moment as the knight continues to hold her. Ruru reflects on Jaren's handsome features while remembering the vicious expressions he once showed the saint.
Gazing into his purple eyes, the girl wonders what the cold knight would look like smiling.
A vision of a lonely young boy standing alone on a patch of grass appears. Framed by blooming roses, Jaren gently cups her chin as the atmosphere between them grows heavy.
A chibi Jaren with caught ears panics and pulls away at the mention of a visitor.
The knight realizes he forgot a visitor was coming to pick up documents from the mansion. Duran suddenly changes his tone, telling the girl to leave the room and head home immediately. The blonde girl stammers a nervous response, clearly taken aback by his sudden and cold dismissal. Jaren tells her to use the back door and mentions her clothes are by the fireplace.
Before running off, the girl shouts, to catch the knight's attention one last time. With a determined look, Ruru shouts that she looks forward to working with him tomorrow. Looking away with a slight blush, the knight quietly agrees as the girl prepares to depart. Jaren stands in the grand hall and watches the girl run away toward the mansion's exit. While putting on his apron, Jaren continues to dwell on how much she looks like her. Internal narration notes that the former saint initially shared the same hair color as the girl.
A ghostly image of a white-haired girl and a veiled saint highlights their visual similarities.
Jiran muses that their personalities are completely different despite the girl looking like the former saint. Looking intensely serious, the knight mutters, "The saint, huh?" as he considers the girl's true identity. A green-haired man with glasses stands at the mansion and scolds Jaren for being late. The visitor, Lear, lectures Jiran on wasting precisely 7 minutes and 29 seconds of his time. Jaren calls the man annoyingly strict while handing over a stack of documents for his review. Lear asks if Jiran really hired an attendant, making the knight look like a startled chibi cat. Lear mentions Hainai spoke of the hiring. Jaren internally grumbles about the other knight being a loudmouth. Touching his face with a gloved hand, Jiran admits he only hired her a moment ago. Lear covers his eyes and states there is something far more important he needs to ask. A dark, bloody image of a fallen saint appears as Lear mentions a suspected assassination plot. Lear notes that on the day the saint died, the one assigned as her personal escort. A flashback shows Jaren covered in blood. Lear asks if Jaren was the one who did it. Jaren stares back in silence, his expression unreadable as the heavy accusation hangs in the air. The man with glasses demands to know what really happened on the day she was killed.
Lear points out that Jiran, known as the Purple Reaper, was famous for hating the saint.
The knight remains silent, covering his mouth with a gloved hand as he listens to the men. Lear states that the person who hated the saint the most was actually Jaren himself. Lear concludes that further questioning is pointless as an image of the saint in thorns fades. Lear says that while it is currently only a suspicion, he and Byrne do suspect Jaren to some extent. Text indicates that 3 weeks have passed as Lear sits with Ruru over tea to discuss the situation. Smiling gently, the blue-haired man holds his teacup while listening to the girl's report during their secret meeting. A chibi Ruru looks distressed and overwhelmed as she realizes she is the one being constantly fed. Lear looks surprised and asks the girl if she is the one being fed instead of the knight.
Ruru shouts in frustration that the knight, Jaren, is far too capable of living and managing on his own.
Standing with a broom on a red carpet, Ruru laments that there is absolutely nothing left for her to clean. Chibi Jaren scowls while offering extra food to a dog-eared Ruru who finds his cooking far too delicious. Ruru despairs over her failure as an attendant, while Lear wonders if their investigation is getting off track. Ruru admits she never knew Jaren had a caring side, and Lear notes that he didn't know either. Lear asks if she has forgotten about the investigation, and Ruru immediately and defensively denies forgetting her mission. Holding up 2 fingers, the girl explains that there are a few odd points surrounding the knight's recent behavior.
Ruru notes that Jaren always leaves at a fixed time every 3 days, possibly to meet a secret mastermind.
Lear asks about the second point of suspicion, while Ruru takes a thoughtful sip from her teacup. The girl reveals that there is a small box in Jaren's room that he strictly told her never to touch. An image of the ornate locked red box appears as Ruru notes it likely contains something very important. Ruru suspects that the box might contain her stolen pendant, which went missing when she was the saint. A close-up of the blonde girl's blue eye emphasizes her intense focus and determination to uncover the truth. Lear looks pensive and agrees that the suspicious box is definitely worth looking into during their investigation. Ruru plans to secretly follow Jaren tomorrow as it is one of the days he usually goes out. Lear prepares to offer assistance, suggesting a way to help her successfully shadow the knight without being caught. Lear clasps his hands together and calls out the name Pepe to summon a special magical companion. A pink and white winged spirit creature with a small horn appears amidst a shower of magical sparkles.
Ruru is stunned and immediately identifies the adorable floating creature as a divine spirit.
Ruru holds the creature, noting it is a being with strong divine power born from the sacred spirit tree. Hugging the spirit, the girl thinks about how she has only heard of high priests forming contracts with them. Lear smiles and assures the girl that Pepe is a clever child who will surely assist her mission. Ruru and Pepe both wink and smile together as the spirit lets out a cheerful and energetic sound. Lear looks at her with a serious expression and tells her not to push herself and to be careful. The scene shifts as a peaceful, starry sky filled with soft purple and pink clouds signals a new day. Jaren stands in his formal attire, looking stern and focused as he prepares to leave the mansion. Wearing a detective's trench coat and hat, Ruru hides behind a lamppost to begin shadowing the suspicious knight. Adjusting her hat, the blonde girl prepares herself to follow Jaren and uncover his secret destination. Operation Shadowing officially begins as Ruru and the spirit, both wearing matching detective hats, prepare to move. The girl decides that while they are tailing Jaren, they should also investigate their other suspects as well. Ruru runs down the stairs with the spirit on her shoulder, eager to find the truth behind the mystery. The locked box is highlighted as one of the major suspicious things the girl intends to investigate further. A chibi Jaren appears over the mansion as Ruru reflects on his regular and mysterious scheduled outings.
Detective Ruru notes that most importantly, Duran was the person assigned as her guard the day she died.
A flashback shows the knight standing guard in front of the sanctum while the saint was inside for prayers. Lear recalls rushing over as Lord Synicus, only to find the saint dead and not a single guard present.
Ruru considers the possibility that if Jaren is the culprit, he must have killed her and then left.
An image of Jaren holding a bloody sword in the rain represents Ruru's suspicion that he made up excuses.
The girl pauses and boops the spirit's nose, reconsidering her assumptions about the knight's true character and motives.
Ruru looks thoughtful and wonders if there is a chance that Jaren is not actually the person responsible.
She reasons that unlike irresponsible knights, Jaren would never abandon his post, regardless of how much he hated her.
Ruru notes his seriousness as an attendant and wonders if someone else killed her during a brief, necessary gap.
The girl reflects that Jaren's stubborn refusal to speak about the past only makes him look more suspicious.
A close-up reveals a perfectly baked lattice-top fruit pie looking warm and steaming on a white plate. Ruru drools with excitement over the delicious pie while Jaren stands beside her with a slightly annoyed expression.
Jaren smiles softly, reflecting on how he feels he and his new attendant are growing closer.
Hiding behind her coat, Ruru resolves to evaluate the knight objectively without letting her emotions interfere.
Shadowing him closely, Ruru watches as Jaren enters a building while the shop's bell rings.
Ruru and the spirit Pepe peek cautiously around the corner of the building to track his movements.
Spotting a wooden cart overflowing with vibrant roses, the girl realizes where the knight has gone.
A chalkboard confirms they are at a flower shop as the girl watches from her hiding spot.
Jaren emerges from the shop carrying a large, elegant bouquet of blue and white flowers.
Ruru finds it annoying that such a beautiful bouquet suits the cold night so well.
The scene shifts to a quiet cemetery at twilight as Ruru wonders about Jaren's final destination.
Carrying the flowers, the knight walks solemnly through the rows of stone tombs and crosses. Ruru realizes they've arrived at the cemetery for temple affiliates and questions his presence there.
Jaren stops before a specific grave, his expression unreadable as he prepares to pay his respects.
The knight reaches out with a gloved hand to gently place the blue bouquet on the tomb. Watching from a distance, the blonde girl is struck by a sudden and shocking realization. The headstone clearly bears the name Rurudi Floor, revealing that Jaren is visiting the saint's grave.
Stunned, the girl stares at the monument, acknowledging that she is standing before her own final resting place. Ruru is deeply confused as she watches the man she suspected of killing her visit her grave.
She wonders why the man who supposedly hated her would come to visit her in secret.
A close-up of Jaren's purple eyes shows a depth of sorrow as he looks at the stone.
Jaren suddenly calls out to Ruru, revealing that he knew she was following him the entire time. The knight demands she come out of hiding, unimpressed by her attempt at shadowing him.
Jaren turns toward her position with his hand resting near his sword hilt in a defensive posture.
Ruru steps out from behind a pillar, looking embarrassed and caught as she faces the knight. Jaren looks surprised to see her while the girl immediately bows and offers a frantic apology. Ruru claims her curiosity as his attendant drove her to follow him to the cemetery. Internal narration notes that even Ruru realizes her excuse for stalking him sounds incredibly weak.
Jaren admits he mistook her for an assassin sent by his stepmother, leaving the girl completely baffled.
The knight notes her lack of killing intent while the girl tries to steer the conversation back.
Ruru gathers her courage and asks why he is visiting the grave of the saint he hated. Jaren describes the former saint as annoying and gloomy, prompting a frustrated reaction from a chibi Ruru.
Leaves swirl in the air as a heavy silence falls between the knight and his undercover attendant. Jaren confesses that she died while under his protection, regardless of the whispers surrounding her death.
Floating leaves frame his admission that he failed his duty by leaving his post that day. Ruru is visibly shaken as she listens to the knight take responsibility for her past demise. The girl realizes the flowers are an offering of guilt because he feels responsible for her death. Looking away with a somber expression, Jaren quietly confirms that her suspicion is correct.
Jaren vows to continue his visits until the mourning period ends, despite knowing it changes nothing.
Reflecting on his words, Ruru sees the sincerity in his regret for failing as her escort.
Looking at the knight's profile, the girl admits she doesn't feel like he is lying to her.
Jaren stands in silence, the weight of his perceived failure evident in his quiet, stoic demeanor. The blonde girl concludes that the knight is definitely not the person who killed her. Stepping forward with newfound determination, Ruru prepares to confront him about the specifics of that day.
Ruru grabs his coat and demands to know why such a serious knight abandoned his post.
Jaren is taken aback by her sudden aggression and the intensity in her blue eyes.
Gripping his clothes tightly, the girl shouts that she cannot stop wondering about the truth. The knight is flustered and blushes deeply at the girl's sudden proximity and desperate questioning. Ruru pleads with him to tell her the real reason he left her side the day she died. Looking conflicted, Jaren begins to speak, preparing to reveal the truth he has been hiding. The sound of a whistling blade cuts through the air as a hidden assassin launches an attack. Jaren shouts a warning as multiple knives fly toward them, catching the bewildered Ruru off guard. Jaren lunges forward to shield Ruru, taking a poisoned blade to the back for her.
Jaren grunts in agonizing pain as Ruru screams out his name in sheer terror.
The knight collapses to his knees while Ruru watches, paralyzed by the sight of his injury. The assassin mocks Jiren's survival, mentioning the lethal poison and his legendary reputation as a reaper. A blood-slicked knife lies on the cobblestones, discarded after delivering its initial devastating strike.
Jiren questions if his stepmother sent the killer, revealing his natural resistance to lethal toxins.
The knight scoffs at his stepmother's persistence, laughing weakly as he acknowledges her predictable schemes.
Ruru realizes Jiren is a target in a dangerous internal feud within the noble House Lyrat. Guilt consumes the girl as she understands Jiren was only struck because he prioritized her safety.
Jiren urgently commands Ruru to run away, desperate to keep her out of his family's mess.
The blonde girl stares in shock, unable to believe he is still trying to protect her.
Jiren insists she leave him behind, refusing to drag her into his dangerous life any further. The assassin reveals his employer's orders were absolute, intending to finish Jiren off once and for all.
Looming over his target, the killer prepares to deliver a final lethal blow to the knight.
A close-up of Ruru's wide blue eyes captures the moment her terror transforms into fierce determination.
The girl suddenly leaps in front of the assassin, shielding Jiren with her own small body.
Jiren cries out in confusion and alarm at her reckless attempt to stand against the killer.
Ruru shouts that abandoning her master now would make her a complete failure as an attendant. Jiren looks at her with a dazed and vulnerable expression, clearly moved by her sudden bravery.
The assassin condescendingly mocks the lone girl for thinking she can stand against a trained killer.
Facing certain death, Ruru feels a surge of panic and desperately searches for any possible advantage.
Ruru notices the discarded blade and realizes the assassin's arrogance is her only chance at survival.
The girl resolves to turn the tide by catching the overconfident man completely off his guard.
A small stone suddenly strikes the assassin's head, providing the perfect momentary distraction Ruru needed.
Startled and confused, the assassin looks around for his invisible attacker while Ruru makes her move.
Pepe, the pink spirit, appears with a determined look, having provided the distraction by throwing the stone.
Ruru is briefly stunned by the spirit's intervention but quickly refocuses on the battle before her.
The assassin yells in frustration while Ruru seizes the opportunity to grab the poisoned knife.
Ruru thanks the invisible spirit for the backup, noting that the assassin cannot see his attacker. Charging forward with all her strength, the girl tackles the distracted man with surprising lethal force.
The assassin grunts in shock as he is suddenly overwhelmed by the girl's desperate, aggressive tackle. Ruru slams the man down onto the cold ground, preventing him from recovering his primary weapon.
Pinning the killer down, Ruru holds his own poison blade inches from his terrified face.
The girl mocks the assassin for his fatal mistake of letting his guard down against her.
Ruru questions the potency of the poison while the assassin stammers in disbelief at her sudden boldness.
Declaring her resolve as superior, the girl reminds the man that she has already died once before.
Ruru strikes with the knife, forcing the killer to experience the same death he intended for others.
The assassin lies defeated and foaming at the mouth as the lethal poison quickly takes effect. Panicking, the blonde girl rushes back to Jiren's side and desperately asks if he is still conscious.
Ruru realizes the poison is spreading through the night and knows she must act immediately to save him.
A vision of her past life as a saint reminds her that purification power can cure poisons.
The girl laments her loss of divine power, feeling helpless as she watches the knight's life fade.
Looking at Jiren's worsening condition, Ruru realizes there is only one dangerous method left to try.
Pepe lets out a soft sound as Ruru looks to the spirit for one last miracle.
A sudden spark of inspiration flashes in the girl's blue eye as a plan finally forms.
The pink spirit floats near her, waiting for the girl to take action during the crisis.
Ruru begs the spirit to lend her its strength again so she can save the knight's life. Glowing with divine energy, the girl feels her former powers as a saint surging back into her.
Ruru gently touches Jiren's face, reflecting on how easily she could heal others in her past.
The girl determines that deeper contact is necessary and prepares to press her lips to his.
Ruru covers her face in embarrassment as she leans over Jiren.
Ruru reflects on her reputation as she prepares to kiss him for the first time.
She tries to convince herself that this is strictly a life-saving medical procedure. Ruru takes Jiren's face in her hands, prioritizing his survival above all else.
Looking into his eyes, she notes there is still a truth she must confirm. The girl closes her eyes and presses her lips to his, desperately calling his name. A dark spiderweb marks the shift into Jiren's memories of a lonely, impoverished childhood.
Young Jiren mourns at his mother's bedside as she passes away in their humble home.
The boy's grief is interrupted as a mysterious nobleman enters the quiet room.
Jiren turns around in shock, startled by the presence of the wealthy stranger.
The Duke of House Lyrat arrives to claim his illegitimate son after the mother's death. Narration reveals his mother was once the Duke's maid and secret lover. His mother's final wish was for the Duke to take Jiren in after she died. Standing alone in a harsh spotlight, the bruised boy finds no warmth in his new home.
The stepmother strikes Jiren, hurling insults about his commoner blood and low status.
She accuses him of theft, looking down at him with pure hatred and disgust. Young Jiren desperately tries to defend himself against the false accusations of his stepmother.
The blonde stepbrother smirks from behind his mother, clearly enjoying the boy's suffering.
Jiren realizes he has been framed yet again by his cruel and conniving relatives.
Finding his father cold and indifferent, Jiren concludes that everyone in the household is rotten. The stepmother loathes him while her son's nasty personality makes life a constant struggle. Fresh wounds mark the boy's face as he endures the daily abuse of House Lyra.
The stepmother orders the servants to lock Duran away in a shed like an animal.
Sullen and isolated, the boy laments missing his lessons while trapped in the dark shed.
Despite his coldness, the Duke ensures Jaren receives an education based on his meritocratic beliefs.
The Duke declares that the most capable child will become the heir, sparking a rivalry.
Infuriated by the constant schemes to ruin him, young Jaren curses his entire family.
The boy looks up in confusion as someone unexpectedly approaches his secluded hiding spot.
A shadow falls across the doorway as Jaren waits to see who has found him. A discarded bucket rolls across the floor as the intruder draws closer to the boy.
Jaren wonders if someone has finally come to check on him before nightfall.
The scene shifts to a peaceful, rolling hill bathed in a soft glow of sunset.
Lying in the grass, Duran finally feels a sense of freedom away from his family. He imagines how easy it would be to simply run away and never look back.
A somber thought reminds him that he has nowhere else to go on his own.
Jaren is suddenly startled by a voice calling out to him from above.
A young girl with lilac hair peers down at him with a look of curiosity.
Noticing the bruises on his face, the girl kindly asks if he is all right. Jaren is surprised by the lack of caution shown by the girl from the time.
Smiling brightly, the girl tells him to stay put while she fetches something special.
She offers him a cluster of flowers, explaining that their nectar can soothe his pain.
Stunned by the unexpected kindness, Jaren gazes at the girl as she offers the gift.
The girl prepares to leave, waving as Jaren struggles to find the right words.
He realizes it feels wrong to ask for her name when he cannot reveal himself.
Duran quickly asks if the girl intends to visit the hill again in the future.
He calls out his thanks for the flowers, hoping for another meeting at sunset. Blushing, the lilac-haired girl confirms she returns every week to gather more flowers. She waves a final goodbye as she walks away across the vibrant green field.
Jaren stands alone, holding the bouquet and reflecting on the girl who showed him kindness.
The Sunset Hill becomes a regular meeting place where their secret friendship begins to blossom.
Meeting again on the Sunset Hill, the two children become secret friends while hiding their true identities. Ruru's honest and cheerful nature provides a sanctuary for Jaren, saving him from his internal darkness.
The young boy awkwardly attempts to hide his injuries by claiming he is simply a clumsy person.
Away from his noble family, Jaren finds comfort in being a mere nobody while with his friend.
Lying in the grass, Jaren finally feels like he is actually alive while holding her hand.
A somber transition marks a sudden and tragic shift in the peaceful atmosphere of their secret meetings.
The children share a final moment of connection as their hands remain tightly linked together in the meadow.
A chilling realization surfaces that happiness can be taken away in a single cruel instant.
Night falls over the shed as Duran reflects on the fragility of his brief moments of peace.
The blonde stepbrother viciously attacks Duran, mocking him for attempting to sneak out on his own.
Jaren grunts in pain, realizing his secret exit has finally been discovered by his cruel relatives.
The bully warns Duran he will never be free again before leaving him broken on the ground.
Gazing at the pink sunset, Duran despairs over the fact that he will never see her again.
The memory of his friends shatters as Jaren laments missing their lesson on breeding flower crowns. A close-up of Jaren's fluttering eyelids signals a return to consciousness or a deep shift in memory.
A booming, unseen voice mocks Jaren for lying in the dirt in such a pathetic state.
The Duke's voice tells Jaren that his current suffering is due to his own weakness as a person.
Standing tall, the Duke orders Jaren to gain power if he wishes to protect what he loves. The nobleman declares that becoming the head of House Lyra will grant Jaren the power he needs.
Stunned by his father's ultimatum, the boy begins to process the path to ultimate power and control.
A vision of their linked hands serves as the core motivation for Jaren's desperate climb to authority.
The Duke walks away, coldly challenging Jaren to rise and climb up on his own sheer will.
Clenching his fist on the ground, Jaren resolves to do whatever is necessary to gain absolute power.
Standing among a field of swords, an older Jaren prepares to claim the status he has earned. Jaren realizes his rising status will make him a target for his stepmother's and stepbrother's deadly jealousy. Kneeling in a beam of light, the boy swears an oath to survive his family's lethal schemes.
Fueled by the memory of his friend's smile, Jaren resolves to survive so they can meet again.
The boy vows to properly introduce himself and reveal his true identity at their next destined meeting. Reaching toward the moon, Jaren hopes his friend will be the first person to know his name.
Adult Jaren's eye snaps open as he finally wakes up from his long, memory-filled unconscious state.
Disoriented and sweating, Jaren sits up in bed while trying to piece together the recent violent events.
The knight realizes he was dreaming of his past and questions what happened after the assassin's attack.
Jaren suddenly notices a presence beside him and looks down toward the edge of his bed.
Ruru lies fast asleep with her head on the bed, her hand still clutching Jaren's during his recovery. Shocked by her presence, Jaren gazes at the girl who stayed by his side throughout the entire night.
A close-up of Rura's eyes shows her slowly waking up as she senses her master has regained consciousness.
A transition page holds the focus on the quiet room before the characters fully engage with one another.
Ruru lifts her head with a groggy expression, blinking as she realizes Duran is finally awake and moving.
The two look at each other in the bright infirmary, still linked by their tightly held hands.
Jaren remains silent and confused while Ruru gazes at him with a look of pure shock and relief.
A close-up of Ruru's wide blue eyes captures the exact moment she realizes her master has returned.
Ruru shouts in excitement, celebrating the fact that Duran has finally woken up from his deep slumber.
The blonde girl explains they are currently safe within the protective walls of the temple infirmary.
Looking weary, Duran immediately asks what happened to the dangerous assassin who had ambushed them earlier.
Ruru recalls the terrifying moment she held the blade, explaining how she eventually called for medical help.
The girl recounts her desperate struggle, hoping her reckless surprise attack was actually effective against the killer. Jaren stares at her in disbelief, questioning if she truly managed to defeat a trained assassin on her own.
Ruru looks away with an awkward and embarrassed expression, unsure of how to explain her sudden boldness. A small chuckle escapes Jaren's lips as he finds the girl's recount of the events quite amusing. Jaren laughs heartily at the absurdity of the situation, calling Ruru a truly outrageous and surprising attendant.
The blonde attendant stares in wide-eyed confusion as Jaren continues to laugh at her story. Duran pauses his laughter as a sudden realization or memory crosses his mind during their conversation.
Jaren admits he never learned her name, shocking the blonde girl who cannot believe his oversight.
The knight dismissively explains that names are not necessary for their communication, leaving Ruru feeling exasperated.
Blushing with embarrassment, the girl finally introduces herself and asks her master to use her name. A soft expression enters Jaren's eyes as he processes the name of his dedicated young attendant. Duran repeats her name to himself, testing how it sounds as he settles back into bed. Jaren explains to Ruru that his stepmother views him as a threat to her family's succession.
Jaren recounts his stepmother's previous attempts on his life, including poisoning and endangering his loyal subordinates.
The knight laments his father's cold indifference toward the lethal schemes and abuse within the household.
Ruru is deeply disturbed by the revelation of the constant danger and betrayal Jaren has faced.
Ruru realizes Jaren remains distant to protect others from the deadly consequences of his family's conflicts.
Looking at Jaren, the girl feels a surge of empathy for the heavy burden he carries alone. Duran maintains a stoic and somber posture as he reflects on his isolated position within the duchy.
Duran declares his intent to eventually claim leadership of the house to finally end the constant threats.
Internally, the girl struggles to reconcile the man before her with the memories of her death.
Hoping for answers, Ruru tentatively asks Jaren about the forbidden box he keeps hidden in his room.
The knight becomes visibly uncomfortable and blushes as he searches for a way to explain the object. Silence falls over the room as Jaren hesitates to reveal the contents of his private treasure.
Jaren's embarrassment grows as he realizes he cannot easily dodge the girl's question about his secret.
Jaren finally admits that the mysterious box contains a sentimental item from his difficult and lonely childhood.
The scene transitions to a memory of the young lilac-haired girl who once brought Jaren comfort. Ruru wonders if the treasure consists of pressed flowers gifted by the girl he met long ago.
Observing his genuine reaction, the attendant concludes that her master is telling the truth about his feelings. Jaren recalls how his childhood friend once compared the color of her hair to his eyes. The memory of the girl's joyful spirit remains a vivid and comforting anchor for Jaren's current resolve. Duran reveals he suspected the deceased saint might have been the girl from his past.
He confesses that he had desperately hoped the saint was the same person who showed him kindness. Jaren explains that the saint's cold and distinct personality quickly shattered his hopes of a reunion.
Admitting his fault, Duran regrets being cruel to the saint simply because she disappointed his expectations. The knight feels a deep sense of guilt for his unfair treatment of the woman he lost.
Jaren compares his current attendant to his memories, noting the confusing similarities in their appearances. He warns himself against becoming too emotionally attached to Ruru based on his lingering past feelings.
Sensing her lingering curiosity, Duran invites his attendant to ask the final question on her mind. The girl tries to recall the exact sequence of events before the violent ambush interrupted them.
Ruru reminds Duran of her accusation regarding his apparent negligence during his duty to the saint.
Startled by the sudden intensity of the conversation, the blonde girl confirms her need for an explanation. Jaren prepares to finally reveal the truth about why he abandoned his post during the saint's death. A sharp sound at the infirmary door interrupts the long-awaited explanation before Jaren can finish. The doctor enters the room just as Ruru asks if her master is ready for evaluation. The elderly physician approaches the bed to conduct a necessary examination of the knight's physical recovery.
Realizing she has overwhelmed her master, Ruru apologies and prepares to leave the room for now.
Ruru hurries out despite Duran's protest, promising to resume their heavy conversation after he is rested. The doctor chuckles at the girl's high energy while a confused Duran simply agrees with him. The physician assures Duran that his recovery will be swift, noting that his injury is manageable. Jaren is startled by the diagnosis, finding it hard to believe his injury was not more severe. The knight recalls a vivid memory of Ruru pressing her lips to his as he succumbed to poison.
Duran questions his own sanity as he tries to reconcile his impossible memory with the medical report.
A wave of deep embarrassment washes over the knight as he considers the implications of his memory.
Jiren struggles to maintain his composure while his thoughts are filled with the image of his attendant.
Walking down the hallway, Ruru sighs in relief after successfully exiting Jiren's room.
Ruru worries if she acted naturally in front of Jiren after saving his life.
A memory flashes of Ruru performing artificial respiration on the unconscious knight to save him. Ruru panics and insists to herself that the kiss was purely for medical purposes.
Blushing, the girl admits she feels strange when she considers Jiren's presence and appearance.
Ruru considers how Jiren resembles the boy from her past whose name remains unknown.
She recalls her sudden departure to become a saint, ending her childhood connection with him.
Suddenly distracted, Ruru trips over a person's leg and shouts in utter surprise.
The blonde attendant loses her balance and falls onto the floor with a loud cry.
Rubbing her head, Ruru complains about someone leaving trash in the middle of the hallway. Ruru looks up and finds herself face to face with a white-haired man sitting on the floor.
The girl is completely stunned as she processes the unexpected and prestigious encounter. Recognizing him as a holy knight, Ruru is shocked while he asks who she is.
Ruru identifies the man as Heine Lanzia, one of the elite and famous four knights.
Heine Lanzia is revealed as a genius knight from a prestigious and long historical lineage. Despite being the kingdom's strongest swordsman, Heine is known as a troublesome and problematic person.
Ruru views Heine as a lazy slacker and a truly difficult problem child to manage.
She recalls the endless trouble Heine caused her during her previous life as the saint. Heine looks at the girl and begins to question her identity with a curious expression.
The white-haired man recognizes her as Jiren's dedicated attendant and expresses his sudden realization.
Ruru confirms her position while Heine complains about her weight and tells her to move.
Horrified, the girl apologizes profusely and quickly moves away from the seated holy knight.
Ruru internally frets about her weight, blaming Jiren's excellent cooking for her supposed gain.
Heine admits he is impressed she became an attendant through her own persistence and effort.
The knight lazily declares that he could never endure such sweaty and difficult hard work.
Heine insults Ruru by suggesting she is wasting her life by trying so hard.
Ruru watches him, thinking that his arrogant and dismissive personality has not changed at all.
She believes his talent makes him naturally condescending toward others who must work for everything.
The girl remembers silently enduring his rudeness during her past life as the holy saint.
Steeled by her new life, Ruru asks if trying to survive is truly a waste.
The girl warns him that humans never know when death will suddenly claim them.
Heine looks genuinely surprised by the sudden and serious intensity of his attendant's words.
Ruru reflects on how anyone can be killed without reason, recalling her own tragic death.
Clenching her fists, the girl begins a vow to live with a new sense of purpose. Ruru declares her commitment to giving everything she has to her second chance at life.
The attendant vows to live so she never experiences the pain of regret ever again. Heine remains silent, staring at the girl with a look of growing interest and curiosity.
Realizing she just spoke out of turn, Ruru becomes flustered and shocked by her own boldness.
Ruru panics and apologizes for talking back, realizing her pent-up frustration led to her outburst. The blonde girl announces her departure and begins to run away from the confusing knight.
Heine looks stunned by her sudden exit, his mouth agape as he processes her words. The holy knight reaches out and grabs her wrist, ordering her to wait for him.
Ruru stops in her tracks and looks back with a confused and nervous expression. Heine leans in close to her face and tells the girl she is very strange.
Stuttering in shock, Ruru repeats his observation back to him while blushing with deep embarrassment.
Heine admits he wants to talk more, though he is unsure of the exact reason. The knight suggests that his unusual desire to speak with her might be called interest.
Ruru pushes him away, complaining that his face is far too close for her comfort.
A voice calls out, demanding the holy knight's attention as he interacts with the attendant.
Heine looks up toward the speaker, his expression shifting as the interaction is suddenly cut short. Jiren intervenes, sternly asking Heine Lanzia what he thinks he is doing to his attendant.
Ruru is startled and relieved by the sudden appearance of her master, who firmly holds her wrist.
Jiren explains he was released by the doctor and saw Heine bothering Ruru in the hallway.
Heine dismissively denies the accusation, mocking Jiren for becoming defensive over an attendant he initially refused.
Waving a hand dismissively, the white-haired knight leaves, claiming that arguing is simply too much of a hassle.
Ruru watches silently as the arrogant knight walks away, her expression clouded with uncertainty and lingering tension.
Sparkles surround the white-haired man as he offers a final, vague parting word while lazily exiting.
Jiren observes that it is highly unusual for someone like Heine to take any interest in another person.
When asked if she is unharmed, the girl nervously confirms that they were merely having a short conversation.
A close-up highlights the girl's focused gaze as she begins to deeply analyze the recent suspicious encounter.
Watching Heine walk away, the girl's internal narrative identifies him as a primary candidate among the culprits.
A decorative text box questions the identity of the person responsible for her previous life's sudden termination.
The scene shifts to a serene view of a grand estate nestled within a thicket of trees. Jiren and Ruru walk through the forest, the attendant struggling slightly while carrying a heavy brown suitcase.
The knight begins his long-delayed explanation regarding his absence during the fatal attack on the Holy Saint.
Jaren admits he abandoned his post after hearing a distant, piercing scream coming from within the temple.
Ruru repeats the word in shock as Jaren describes hearing a young woman's desperate plea for help.
Despite his duty, the knight explains he could not ignore the cry and rushed toward the sound.
Jaren recounts discovering a distressed lady-in-waiting who had supposedly assaulted by a lover who fled. Following the story closely, the blonde girl asks what the woman told him after he offered his assistance. The knight reveals the woman begged for silence, fearing she would lose her job if the incident surfaced. Ruru realizes Jaren's noble silence was meant to protect his stranger, despite how it appeared to others. A grim narrative box reflects on the fact that her death occurred during that precise security lapse.
The timing of the distraction is noted as being suspiciously perfect, suggesting it was a calculated maneuver.
Considering the shadowy figure of the lady-in-waiting, the girl wonders if she was working for the mastermind.
Ruru questions if the woman staged a performance, fully aware that Jaren's character would compel him to intervene. The text concludes the event was a trap designed to remove her guard so she could be killed.
Jaren pauses, mentioning one more significant detail that has recently come back to his mind.
Looking serious, the knight states his belief that the woman was actually an attendant serving Haine Lanzia.
A vision of Haine lounging on a throne reinforces the girl's conviction that he is the key. A chibi Ruru holds a broom on a page featuring various recruitment details and social media links. A tall, silver-haired man gently combs Ruru's hair while she sits patiently and delivers her formal report. The man explains his regret over her short hair, noting that divine power is most potent there.
He leans in, expressing a sincere wish to personally assist in caring for her hair from now on.
Looking at her with a gentle smile, the man remarks on how quickly young people seem to grow. Ruru teases that he is thinking like a mother, prompting an indignant response from the silver-haired man. A close-up shows the small horned pet creature resting comfortably while observing the interaction with wide eyes. The silver-haired man looks down thoughtfully, processing the full weight of the information he has just received. The silver-haired man notes that Jaren is in the clear and is not the culprit, making Haine the next investigation target. The blonde girl looks down with a solemn expression, silently agreeing with the shift in their investigation's focus. The mysterious attendant's image reappears as the man identifies her as the link to the mastermind. Haine's shadowed face is shown while the man notes he would be the simplest connection to the truth. The man announces that Ruru will be reassigned from Jaren's service to Haine's to facilitate the investigation. Ruru remembers Jaren's kind cooking and admits to herself that leaving his side feels a little lonely. Petting the small creature, the girl wonders how she can possibly break the news of her reassignment to Jaren. In a sudden comedic panic, Ruru realizes Jaren's perfect housekeeping means he likely won't even miss her. She imagines Jaren as a cat-like figure, feeling relieved that his noisy attendant has finally departed.
Noticing her distress, the silver-haired man asks the girl if something is bothering her or weighing on her mind. Forcing a bright smile, Ruru quickly denies any trouble and insists that everything is perfectly fine.
The girl hardens her resolve, telling herself she has no time to dwell on her own lonely feelings. The girl's internal narrative reaffirms her intense vow to uncover her former life's murderer. 1 week later, the blonde girl arrives at a grand estate and calls for Jaren.
Hurrying through the corridors, the attendant politely announces her presence to her master.
Ruru reflects on her failure to inform Jaren about her reassignment despite an entire week passing. The girl pauses abruptly after catching a scent that fills the hallway with a familiar aroma. Jaren is busy cooking in the kitchen and warmly greets Ruru as she enters the room.
The knight observes her new hairstyle, and the girl explains she wanted to change her look.
Ruru recalls the High Priest's concerns regarding the professional appearance required for her new post. Looking at her with a soft expression, Jaren offers a sincere compliment on her new appearance.
The girl reacts with extreme shock and embarrassment after receiving the unexpected praise from her master.
Changing the subject, the knight mentions her arrival happened at a perfectly opportune moment for them.
Looking puzzled, the blonde attendant asks for clarification regarding what he is currently preparing in kitchen.
A lavishly roasted bird sits atop a beautifully decorated table, glistening under the bright lights.
Ruru stands in awe before the feast as the knight watches her reaction with quiet satisfaction.
The girl marvels at the elaborate meal and asks Jaren what specific occasion they are celebrating.
Looking slightly bashful, the knight admits he wanted to properly express his gratitude and an apology.
Jaren sincerely thanks her for saving his life during the previous dangerous and sudden assassin attack.
Stunned by his humility, the girl stares at her master with a speechless and wide-eyed expression.
Recalling the recent battle, the attendant dismisses his thanks, noting his current difficult and stressful circumstances.
The knight prepares to share a significant new piece of information that has recently come out. He explains how his stepmother received a report labeling Ruru as his most formidable bodyguard protector.
Ruru is horrified by her new reputation, questioning why she is considered the strongest knight bodyguard. Jaren notes the failed assassin likely blamed a frail girl to avoid admitting his embarrassing defeat.
The knight believes his stepmother's current wariness will prevent any further assassination attacks for a while.
Ruru expresses relief while the knight credits her entirely for his current safety and mental peace.
Jaren presents the feast to her, encouraging the blonde girl to eat as much as she likes.
The beautifully prepared meal serves as a heartfelt token of the knight's deep and sincere appreciation.
Looking deeply touched, the girl processes the sincerity and kindness behind her master's generous gesture.
Jaren leans on the table and assures her that there is no more danger in staying.
Looking at her intensely, the knight asks if she will continue to serve as his attendant. Caught completely off guard, the girl stammers as she struggles to find an appropriate verbal response.
Internal panic grips the girl as she wonders how to handle this incredibly difficult and sudden situation.
While touched by his need for her, the girl feels the weight of her hidden secret.
The knight waits in silence, his focused gaze fixed firmly on his flustered and hesitating attendant.
Ruru realizes this is the crucial moment to reveal her reassignment, but her nerves fail her.
Despite knowing the truth must be told, the girl continues to hesitate due to her feelings. Panicking, Ruru makes a frantic excuse about the high priest and flees the room immediately.
The girl runs away while Jaren sighs, noting how she remains as restless as she ever was.
A close-up shows the knight's fond expression as he reflects on his attendant's unique personality. Jaren decides to prepare dessert while he waits, but he notices someone else has just arrived.
The knight wonders who has arrived and initially suspects another visit from a known green-haired acquaintance.
The grand hall stands empty and silent, illuminated by the warm glow of the chandelier above.
Hein Lanzia appears in the doorway, exuding his usual air of arrogant and effortless confidence.
Jaren expresses surprise at the rare visit, noting that Hein has never come to his home.
Hein mocks Duran's kitchen apron while the knight's chibi form reacts with deep embarrassment and frustration.
Jaren demands that the visitor state his business quickly, and Heine mentions his interest in Ruru.
Hein provocatively suggests that the blonde girl will not remain Duran's attendant for much longer.
The knight's expression darkens with immediate hostility as he demands an explanation for the vague claim.
With a smug and confident smile, the white-haired knight declares his intention to take Ruru away.
Walking alone through the lush grounds, the blonde girl lets out a heavy and weary sigh.
Jaren gazes forward with a determined yet slightly conflicted expression in his purple eyes.
The blonde girl recalls her inability to answer Jaren and her subsequent hasty escape.
Narrative bubbles confirm her lingering guilt over failing to mention the upcoming caretaker replacement.
Ruru despairs over her timing as Jaren presents the lavish meal he specially prepared.
A close-up shows the blonde attendant looking downward with a bead of nervous threat.
From a distance, the girl observes two men in uniform standing within the dense forest.
While hiding behind a tree, the blonde girl identifies the pair as palace officials.
The two officials discuss the recent ongoing poor harvest and increasing damage for monsters.
Ruru listens intently as the men confirm that the environmental crisis has become problematic.
The blonde girl worries that miasma might be accumulating within the sacred spirit tree.
Text boxes describe how the once uninhabitable land was miraculously restored by the spirit tree. A dark vision warns that without the saint's purification, monsters born from miasma will return.
The girl senses something is wrong, feeling the miasma is building up far too quickly.
Ruru wonders if the silver-haired high priest is hiding the truth to protect her feelings.
The officials begin discussing the previous saint and the impact of Lady Rurudi's death.
They admit that despite her poor reputation, her strong divine power successfully fulfilled her duties.
Ruru offers a small, cynical smile as she notes their late realization of her value.
The men mention that the successor for the saint's position is Minister Hayden's daughter.
The blonde girl confirms to herself that Erica will indeed be the next holy saint.
Erica Hayden is introduced as the candidate possessing the highest divine power after the former saint.
Narrative boxes detail how Erica viewed the previous saint as an enemy after losing her seat.
The pink-haired girl is identified as the one who originated the malicious promiscuous saint rumors.
Despite the history, Ruru dismisses the pink-haired girl as nothing more than a minor bully.
A sudden, sharp command rings out through the forest as someone demands Ruru's immediate attention.
Erica Hayden and her companions approach the startly blonde girl with an arrogant, aggressive stance.
The girl panics internally, reminding herself that she is no longer the person they once knew.
The pink-haired candidate aggressively questions if the blonde girl is actually Lord Jaren's personal attendant.
Looking flustered and caught off guard, Ruru nervously confirms her current professional role to them.
Erica's companions demand an explanation for how a commoner successfully gained the knight's personal favor.
The followers mock Ruru's alleged status as a relative of the high priest with disdain.
A chibi vision shows the girl and the high priest concocting their fake family cover story.
Narrative text reflects on the untouchable status of the four knights within the social hierarchy.
A group of admirers surrounds the knights, highlighting their immense popularity and distant, idol-like nature.
Ruru explains her persistence in visiting Duran's villa daily until he finally agreed to hire her.
Erica shouts at the blonde girl, commanding her to stop causing trouble for Lord Jaren.
One of the followers physically shoves the blonde attendant, causing her to cry out in pain.
The aggressive woman warns Ruru that she is currently standing in the future saint's path.
With dark, malicious smiles, the women ask the pink-haired girl for her approval of their plan.
Looking genuinely uncomfortable, Erica expresses her belief that their violent suggestions are going much too far.
The blonde girl watches the interaction with a look of sudden realization dawning on her face.
Ruru realizes that Erica likely wasn't the primary mastermind behind her past life's persistent bullying.
A mysterious man's chin and mouth appear as he offers a casual and mocking greeting. The green-haired man hangs upside down from a tree branch while commenting on the girl's fun. The green-haired man jumps down to the forest floor, surprising the blonde girl with his arrival.
Exuding confidence, the green-haired man smiles while striking a composed and very stylish pose.
The man casually asks the group of girls what they are currently busy doing.
The blonde girl stands frozen in shock as the group identifies the newcomer as Lord Byrne.
Byrne leans in toward the pink-haired girl, jokingly comparing the gathering to a friendly social meeting.
The group blushes furiously while the pink-haired girl stammers through a quick and desperate denial.
Byrne suggests Erica was picking on the attendant out of jealousy for Duran's favor or something similar.
Surprised by the sudden change, the blonde girl looks up with wide, curious eyes.
A green-haired man in spectacles appears behind them and calls out to get their attention. The taller twin complains about paperwork while Byrne jokes about strengths and weaknesses, leaving his brother exasperated.
The taller twin demands to know what the Saint cadets are currently doing in the forest.
Denying any wrongdoing, the companions claim they aren't doing anything as they flee the scene immediately.
Erica frantically shouts for her friends to wait for her as she chases after them. The pink-haired girl looks back flustered as she makes her hasty exit from the forest.
Surprised by the sudden change, the blonde girl looks up with wide, curious eyes.
Ruru watches the girls disappear into the distance while the twins stand nearby. Ruru realizes that Erica's actual personality differs greatly from her previous assumptions.
Ruru wonders about the discrepancy between Erica's current behavior and her reputation.
Byrne turns his attention back to the blonde girl, addressing her specifically as Jaren's personal attendant. The twins confirm the girl's existence as Jaren's attendant while Ruru stammers in Shafet. Ruru realizes she has unexpectedly run into the famous twin holy knights. The blonde girl bows and thanks the knights for helping her out of the situation.
Byrne dismisses her thanks, stating he did nothing before moving on to a more important question.
Leaning in, Byrne asks how she managed to gain the favor of the stoic Lord Jaren.
Byrne flippantly suggests grabbing tea, but his brother commands him to stop using shallow, flirty lines.
The older twin leaves for work, advising Byrne to stop flirting while Byrne complains he is stiff.
Byrne blows a kiss and tells her to greet Jaren while Ruru remains completely speechless.
The grand villa stands under the warm glow of the setting sun as the day ends.
Ruru walks toward the ornate white doors, reflecting on the unexpected delay.
Ruru despairs that the day's constant surprises have prevented her from telling Jaren about her reassignment. Looking determined, the girl resolves to find the courage to tell Jaran the truth now.
Ruru reaches for the handle, firm in her decision to properly inform her master. Ruru enters the room and begins to apologize for her lateness before she is suddenly grabbed. The girl lets out a sharp gasp as she is pulled forcefully against the wall.
The doors slam shut as she finds herself trapped by her master's intense presence.
A close-up highlights Duran's hand as he pins the girl's arm against the door. Jaren towers over his attendant, radiating a sense of intense and suppressed emotion.
Looking flustered, the blonde girl looks up at the knight and calls out his name.
Jaren explains that the white-haired knight, Heine, visited the villa immediately after the girl had left. The knight reveals Heine's claim that he intended to take the attendant for himself. A flashback shows the white-haired knight, Heine, wearing a smug smirk during his recent visit. Looking skeptical and annoyed, Duran demands to know the meaning behind the white-haired knight's claim. Heine explains that he learned about the situation directly from the silver-haired high priest. The white-haired knight states that Ruru will have a new master and is leaving Jaren's service. Jaren stands in stunned silence, his purple eyes wide as he processes the sudden news. Heine nonchalantly notes that switching attendants is common, mentioning that his own staff are constantly rotating. Hein says he would normally ignore it, but Jaran finally finding someone he likes makes the replacement weird. A close-up shows Duran's growing distress and anger at the revelation of the transfer. Heine recounts asking the high priest, who said she is a trainee rotating posts to gain experience.
Hein dismisses the official story as an excuse and prepares to state his own theory.
Mockingly, Heine suggests the girl simply grew tired of being around Jaren and chose to leave. Heine declares Ruru will soon be his attendant while Jaran reacts with immediate and fierce denial. Hein mocks Jaran, telling him to say his final goodbyes while he still can. Ruru notes Lord Sinicus gave a nice official transfer reason, but Heine stirred things up like a chaos gremlin.
In a chibi form, Heine shrugs and claims he was only stating his honest thoughts.
Looking pained, Jaran asks if staying with him truly put the girl in significant danger.
The blonde girl looks shocked while wondering if Jaren's request was actually a selfish act. Jaren pins his attendant against the door, leaning in close with a very serious expression. Looking up at her master with wide eyes, the blonde girl lets out a soft denial. Jaren admits that the white-haired knight might be correct regarding his own recent behavior toward her.
Ruru blushes intensely while staring up at the tall knight with a look of pure shock.
The girl continues to stare at her master in silence as her face turns bright red. Ruru frantically denies his claims, shouting that she does not hate him at all in frustration. The blonde girl loudly declares that her fondness for her master increases with every passing day.
Ruru praises him for being an accomplished member of the legendary 4 Holy Knights of Status. Ruru notes his cooking skills and hard work while Chibi Jaran looks flustered and embarrassed. The girl insists that the current situation was not his fault while the knight looks away. Ruru begins to describe how cool he looked protecting her before Jaren forcefully silences her. Looking completely overwhelmed, the knight tells his attendant to be quiet as he has heard enough.
Duran keeps his hand over her mouth as the blonde girl looks up at him bewildered.
Jaren regrets allowing himself to be provoked by Highness taunts while a vision looms behind him.
The knight explains the official reason for the transfer involves her gaining more varied work experience.
Ruru nervously confirms the explanation while the two stand together in the Grand Villa hallway.
Jaren warns that the white-haired knight is unpredictable and will be a very difficult master.
Ruru recalls the massive amount of trouble the man caused during her previous life as saint.
The knight offers his support, telling her to come to him with any genuine problems. Ruru looks stunned and deeply touched by the knight's sincere offer of help and protection.
Ruru thanks him enthusiastically, claiming his supportive words give her the strength of 100 people.
Jaren offers a warm and gentle smile as he looks down at his blonde personal attendant.
The two stand together peacefully in the hallway as the knight's expression softens with genuine kindness.
Looking happy and determined, the girl gives a joyful shout as she accepts the new role.
The blonde girl arrives at the Grand Estate, officially beginning her service for Lord Hein today.
Ruru identifies two suspicious things about her new master as he sits on a grand throne.
Narrative text explains how a gardener witnessed the white-haired knight fleeing the temple in a panic.
Ruru suspects that his past panic is directly linked to the day she was previously killed.
Narrative text notes that a woman who lured Jaren away was once one of Hein's attendants.
The priest's investigation reveals the woman quit her job and disappeared before Ruru's previous funeral. Ruru notes the suspicious disappearance and resolves to gather information from the other current attendants.
The girl resolves to get close to the staff to begin her secret investigation into things.
A man in glasses and formal butler attire opens the door, looking surprised at the arrival.
Ruru introduces herself to the glasses-wearing attendant as the new staff member assigned to the position.
The man in glasses breaks into tears of joy upon learning a new recruit has arrived.
The man excitedly shouts to the rest of the staff that a new recruit has arrived.
Exhausted maids surround the blonde girl, thanking goodness that they no longer work alone in hell.
The butler welcomes her to hell while the maids see her as a ray of hope.
The man enthusiastically leads the anxious blonde girl into the building to begin working immediately. The girl begins to offer a polite greeting before stopping suddenly at the shocking interior view.
Ruru stands in horror at the chaotic, blood-stained, and messy state of the villa's interior room.
Narrative text notes this room is the exact opposite of Duran's perfectly neat and organized villa. A chibi version of Heine sits flippantly in a chair while drinking tea amidst the mess. The staff laments being run ragged by the free-spirited and reckless ways of their current master. Attendants were initially drawn to his combat distinctions, but the reality proved far too difficult to handle. The butler notes that previous staff members all broke down and none of them lasted long. The maid praises Ruru as a legend for serving the impenetrable and stoic Lord Duran admirably. Narrative text recalls how Erica and her friends were previously jealous of her serving Lord Jaren.
Ruru worries that her growing fame will make her secret investigation much more difficult to conduct.
The staff enthusiastically welcomes the new recruit, urging her to greet Lord Hein.
Gripping the girl's shoulder, the maid desperately pleads for the new recruit not to quit.
Standing before a blood-stained doorway, Ruru nervously announces her presence to her new master.
Ruru peeks into the chaotic, messy bedroom and realizes the massive cleaning task ahead.
A figure remains fast asleep beneath the bedsheets, emitting soft snores in the silent room. The girl apologizes for intruding as a hand suddenly reaches from under the covers.
Ruru offers a quick reading while a large hand lunges toward her through air.
With a startled cry, the blonde girl is forcefully yanked forward by an unseen strength.
Heine, wearing blood-stained attire, pulls the flustered blonde girl onto the bed with him.
Looking completely dazed and exhausted, the white-haired knight stares blankly at his new attendant.
A split panel shows Heine's blank gaze and Ruru's wide-eyed shock during their awkward encounter.
Looking annoyed, the girl demands to know why the knight suddenly pulled her toward him.
Ruru introduces herself while mentally planning a swift departure from the half-asleep man's presence.
The blonde girl asks to be released as the knight continues to stare at her. Hein suddenly collapses against his attendant, burying his face into her shoulder while she stammers. The white-haired knight nuzzles closer, seemingly finding a comfortable spot to continue his slumber.
A thought bubble reveals Heine's perception that Ruru smells like a dog basking in the sun.
Heine rests his head on her shoulder as the girl remains completely frozen in surprise. Imagining herself as a literal puppy, the blonde girl is bewildered by his strange comparison. The knight finds her scent calming while the blonde girl lets out a startled squeak.
Half awake, Heine offers a faint apology before his eyes begin to drift shut once more.
The white-haired knight rolls over, finally falling back into a deep sleep on his bed.
Ruru watches him sleep, noting that she can never predict his strange and impulsive behavior.
The girl realizes that being Heine's personal attendant will be an incredibly difficult life path. A peaceful close-up shows the bloodstained knight sleeping soundly after his confusing and intense actions.
Chibi Ruru chases the soaking wet knight, scolding him for walking around immediately after bathing.
During a meal, the blonde attendant fruitlessly orders the picky knight to eat his vegetables.
Wearing ram horns, Chibi Heine begs for 5 more minutes as Ruru struggles to wake him.
Looking physically and mentally drained, the blonde girl admits that she is completely and utterly exhausted.
Ruru reflects on her hectic schedule, fearing she lacks the time to investigate the past. The butler and maid offer tea, praising the girl for her hard work and perseverance. Sipping her tea, the girl commends the other staff for tolerating such a selfish master.
The staff expresses admiration for Ruru's ability to speak her mind directly to Lord Heine.
Looking resigned, the blonde girl admits that the knight does not actually listen to her.
The butler highlights Heine's legendary military prowess, recounting his single-handed defeat of 300 enemies.
A graphic compares Jiran's reputation to Heine's title as the legendary White Sword Saint.
The staff describes Heine's brilliance in combat despite his usual lazy and slacking daily behavior.
The maid notes that while taking care of him is difficult, he is simply unforgettable. Heine suggests that Ruru looks like the type who wastes their life by trying too hard.
Ruru recalls the pain of biased opinions from her past life as a misunderstood holy saint.
Looking determined, the girl resolves to uncover the true nature of the man she serves.
The butler describes Heine's signature move, a technique that pierces the heart with one thrust.
A close-up of Ruru's eye shows a spark of shock as she recognizes the description.
A grim vision depicts the saint's heart being pierced by a blade in a bloody strike.
A panicked servant rushes into the room, shouting that a bad situation has just developed.
The staff and Ruru look up in shock as they hear the urgent and alarming gaze.
The messenger bursts into the kitchen to report the sudden appearance of a dangerous monster.
A narrative flashback shows a colossal serpent monster appearing near the gate as Heine stands ready.
Hein lets out a massive yawn as he prepares to fight the giant, roaring beast.
Looking incredibly bored and tired, the white-haired knight yawns dismissively at the looming monster threat.
Ruru worries that the appearance of such strong monsters puts even Lord Heine in danger.
The butler and maid panic, shouting that there is a terrible emergency occurring right now.
A hand suddenly grabs Ruru's shoulder, startling her as she turns to see who it is.
The staff excitedly identifies Ruru as the perfect new recruit to handle this specific situation.
Chibi Ruru looks completely baffled, unable to understand why her coworkers are acting so strangely.
Ruru questions why Lord Heine fighting a monster represents a lucky chance for her.
The butler tells her to go watch Heine's legendary swordsmanship instead of doing her chores.
The man looks genuinely shocked when Ruru asks if Heine might actually get hurt. He insists that defeat is impossible for Heine while the knight faces the colossal serpent. The butler pushes the skeptical girl along, promising that seeing the knight's skill will explain everything.
With an eager grin, the man bets that Ruru will be totally captivated by the fight.
Recalling Heine's lazy habits, Ruru remains highly doubtful that the knight will be truly impressive.
The scene shifts to the grand estate gate under a vibrant and colorful sunset sky.
Ruru arrives at the forest edge, horrified by the size and ferocity of the massive monster.
Hiding behind a thick tree trunk, the blonde girl searches the clearing for her new master.
She spots Heine standing small but defiant before the giant, roaring mouth of the purple beast.
Looking bored, the white-haired knight sighs about how much of a pain the encounter is.
Heine draws his dark sword, planning to finish quickly so he can go eat cookies.
The knight leaps onto the serpent's back as the creature hisses and thrashes in the forest.
Heine runs across the monster's scales, delivering a powerful strike that glows with bright blue energy.
The white-haired knight moves with blinding speed, swinging his large blade through the air with precision. Finding the hide tough, Heine prepares a focused follow-up strike to deal more significant damage. The massive serpent roars in agony as Heine lands another heavy blow against its thick scales. A close-up of Heine's eye reveals his intense focus despite his earlier outward appearance of boredom.
With one massive slash, the knight sprays the monster's blood across the clearing in a decisive move.
Heine casually decides to target the beast's weak points as he stands covered in dark red blood.
Watching from the shadows, Ruru admits that his combat instincts and skill are truly on another level.
Heine's movements are described as a beautiful dance as he strikes at the towering purple monster.
Ruru wonders why Heine is fighting alone when the royal knights are visible standing nearby.
She notes that the other knights are merely watching instead of offering any backup or support.
Two knights mock Heine's title, suggesting he should be happy about getting all the public praise.
Ruru is appalled by their lazy attitude as they argue the saint should work harder than them.
Ruru recalls the popularity of the four knights while looking at the resentful soldiers before her. A freckled knight smugly suggests they should just let the genius do all the difficult work.
The soldiers laugh about Heine and the monster potentially killing each other so they get credit.
Trembling with righteous anger, the blonde girl decides she cannot let their disrespectful behavior slide. Ruru steps out from her hiding spot, marching directly toward the idle and gossiping royal knights. Heine stands triumphant in a spray of blood as the defeated monster collapses behind him.
The knight sighs as the massive creature's remains begin to disintegrate into the air around him.
Wiping blood from his face, the exhausted knight complains about how tired the fight made him.
Heine dreads going home, visualizing Ruru nagging him for arriving at the villa covered in blood.
He dismisses her concerns, though he remains visibly bothered by his messy appearance. The white-haired knight looks over at the group of royal knights standing a short distance away.
He thinks back on their bitter comments regarding his status as a combat genius.
A weary expression crosses Heine's face as he observes the soldiers who refuse to help him.
The knight's attention is drawn toward the group of royal guards lingering in the clearing.
Narrative text reveals Heine's deep frustration with their constant jealousy and annoying inferiority complexes.
Hein pauses as he catches sight of a familiar blonde braid moving toward the idle soldiers.
Ruru confronts the two stunned knights, standing with her hands on her hips in a furious pose.
The blonde girl shouts that she has heard enough of their disrespectful talk about Lord Haide.
Ruru angrily confronts the idle knights for their lack of gratitude toward Lord Hein's efforts.
The soldiers mockingly question who she is, prompting Ruru to identify herself as Hein's attendant while condemning their decision to abandon the monster hunt to one man.
The group of royal guards reacts with utter shock and indignation at being scolded by a burl.
As Heine looks on with a surprised expression, Ruru continues her tirade against those who spoke ill of someone risking their life in battle.
The blonde attendant shouts with intense fury, determined to silence the disrespectful gossip once and for all. Surrounded by a shimmering aura, the blood-stained knight stares blankly as he witnesses his attendant's unexpected defense. Feeling insulted, the soldiers grow aggressive and order the young woman to watch her mouth immediately. One of the knights lunges forward to seize Ruru, dismissively labeling her as nothing more than a lowly attendant girl.
Hein suddenly intervenes, yanking Ruru back to safety while his face remains smeared with the monster's blood.
Ruru lets out a startled gasp as she realizes her master has stepped in to protect her. With a chillingly calm expression, the white-haired knight asks if the soldier truly intended to raise a hand against his staff.
The three soldiers tremble and break into a cold sweat under the knight's sudden, intimidating presence. Hein begins to draw his sword while one of the soldiers attempts to offer a weak excuse.
Holding Ruru close, the legendary knight coldly declares that he has no intention of forgiving their attempted violence.
A tiny version of the blonde girl holds her cleaning supplies against a playful pink background.
Hein stands defiantly before the cowering royal guards, identifying himself by his full name, Hein Lanzia.
The white-haired knight boastfully reminds the group that the difficult battle only took him 5 minutes. Looking down at the soldiers, Heine insults them as mere wannabes who couldn't achieve his level in a lifetime.
The royal guards are paralyzed by a mixture of deep offense and overwhelming fear of the saint. Speech bubbles from the side continue the mockery, calling the armored men pitiful for failing to defeat a single beast.
Hein suggests the guard should resign early while Chibi Ruru frantically begs him to stop the provocations.
One of the soldiers loses his temper, reaching for his weapon in a moment of reckless rage.
As the soldier draws his blade and shouts about being humiliated, Heine's sharp gaze focuses on his opponent.
A close-up shows the knight's hand hovering near Ruru's shoulder as the tension reaches its peak.
Raising his heavy dark blade, Heine warns his attacker that death is a finality beyond any complaint. The blood-soaked knight lunges forward with incredible speed to end the confrontation in one single move. With a powerful swing of his sword, Heine shatters the opponent's guard and sends their weapon flying.
The aggressive soldier is thrown backward into the dirt, completely defeated by the knight's superior strength.
Terrified and gasping, the fallen man stares up as Heine's blade is pointed directly at his face. Hein stares down at his opponent with a bored expression, asking if he actually wishes to continue.
Terrified by his overwhelming power, the soldiers decide to retreat while shouting curses back at the pair. As the enemies flee into the forest, Heine casually sheathes his weapon while Ruru watches in silence.
Wiping blood from his cheek, the white-haired knight softly asks Ruru if she has sustained any injuries.
Ruru offers a bright, relieved smile, thanking him and praising his magnificent display of legendary swordsmanship skills.
Hein looks away with a slight blush, dismissively claiming that his combat performance was merely normal for him.
The knight pauses mid-sentence, looking as though he has something more personal he wants to express.
A sparkly aura surrounds the knight's back as he walks away, still heavily covered in monster blood. Ruru remains frozen in place, her expression reflecting a complex mix of surprise and growing suspicion.
In a stylized scene, a grumpy Chibi Heine ignores the baffled and wide-eyed Chibi blonde girl. Realizing he is walking away, the girl chases after the knight and begs him to wait up.
A framed title card appears, signaling a shift in the narrative and the girl's internal perspective.
Looking at his silhouette, Ruru realizes that Heine's decisive skill confirms he could have killed her past self.
With a determined gaze, the girl resolves to uncover the truth of her past, one step at a time. The scene shifts to the grand estate, standing silent and illuminated under a clear, starry night sky.
The energetic butler and maids announce that a special dinner has been prepared for the returning master.
They explain that the feast is meant to celebrate his successful subjugation of the dangerous forest monster.
Hein looks completely unamused by the attention while Ruru stands behind him with a resigned expression. The staff gleefully announces that they have prepared all of Lord Hein's absolute favorite things to eat.
The table is overflowing with decadent sweets and desserts while the staff celebrates their master's return.
Looking at the sugary feast, Ruru realizes that the estate staff are the ones who truly spoil him.
Hein stares intently at the blonde girl and softly calls her name in the quiet room.
The white-haired knight says she always recommends balanced meals, while Ruru confirms her commitment to him.
Looking at the towers of desserts, the knight considers choosing the healthier options Ruru suggested. Haina asks the blonde girl if she would be happy if he actually ate the vegetables.
Ruru admits she would think that is quite admirable while her master considers the healthy change.
Looking grumpy and blushing, the knight sulks over the prospect of trading his sweets for vegetables. Hein orders the butler to save the sweets and instead bring him a proper, balanced meal. The knight confidently crosses his arms and winks, vowing to eat every single thing provided. The butler and maids cheer with joy as they rush off to prepare the master's food. Ruru watches the staff's chaotic celebration with a mixture of confusion and wide-eyed shock.
A narrator questions what kind of sudden heart change led the picky master to eat tomatoes.
A flashback depicts Heine as a selfish master who loudly proclaimed his hatred for fish and vegetables. The staff gossips about the miracle of Heine eating greens, giving Ruru all of the credit.
Ruru denies doing anything special while the staff praises her as a legendary and capable attendant. Ruru's voice yells that she didn't do anything special as the scene shifts to the millet. A close-up of Ruru's focused eyes transitions the scene as she prepares for her next move. Ruru sits with a frustrated expression while Heine sleeps with his head comfortably on her lap.
Narrative text explains that the knight demanded a lap pillow as a reward for eating his vegetables.
Hein imagines himself as a chibi finishing his meal and begging for praise from his attendant.
Ruru wonders if the knight is being spoiled or if he has genuinely grown attached to her. The butler and maids give a supportive thumbs up before leaving the pair alone together.
Ruru realizes that the present moment is her best chance to finally act on her plans.
The blonde girl thinks to herself that she might finally be able to probe for more information. Ruru tells Heine she learned anew today just how incredibly strong he is in combat.
Hein observes that she doesn't seem to panic easily, and Ruru agrees with a calm smile.
Ruru mentions hearing he ran away in panic behind the temple, which prompts Heine's confused response. The attendant sweats while guiding the conversation toward the sensitive topic of his past and temple rumors. Determined to find answers, the blonde girl resolves to press further into the knight's personal secrets. Dark imagery accompanies the mention of the day when the previous saint met their tragic end. Narrative text bluntly confirms that the previous saint passed away, casting a shadow over the scene.
Heine acknowledges the time she mentioned, while Ruru observes his reaction with intense, focused eyes.
The white-haired knight asks the blonde girl if she truly wants to know why he was panicking. Ruru confirms her curiosity, her face set in a serious expression as she waits for his answer.
Heine brings a finger to his lips and tells the blonde girl to come much closer.
Ruru leans in with a puzzled expression, trying to hear the secret the knight is sharing.
Heine suddenly pulls her face close to his, startling the blonde attendant with his sudden intimacy.
Outside the room, the staff tries to stop an intruder who yells about an urgent emergency.
Jaren slams the doors open and frantically shouts Ruru's name as he bursts into the room. The dark-haired knight is stunned as he sees Heine and Ruru in a seemingly intimate embrace.
Ruru lets out a cry of shock as the unexpected intrusion breaks the silence of the room.
Jaren stands paralyzed with wide eyes, completely taken aback by the scene unfolding before him.
The frantic knight bursts into the room again, his momentum carrying him toward the shocked pair.
Jaren's face reflects a mixture of anger and disbelief as he stares at the white-haired knight.
Jaren glares with intense purple eyes, his voice reflecting his deep frustration as he addresses Heine.
Hein sits on the couch with Ruru, looking completely unbothered by the sudden arrival of Jaren.
Hein asks Jaren why he is barging in, and Jaren struggles to explain his unexpected appearance.
Jaren explains he heard rumors that Heine's attendant was almost attacked by a monster at the palace.
Ruru looks at the newcomer, her internal thoughts identifying him as the knight named Jaren.
Jaren appears with a flowery aura, making Ruru wonder if he was actually worried about her safety.
Blushing deeply, the blonde attendant offers her sincere thanks to Jaren for his concern and protection.
Chibi Ruru energetically insists she is unhurt and perfectly fine following the earlier incident.
Suddenly, Heine lunges forward and pulls the startled blonde attendant into a firm, protective embrace. The white-haired knight glares at Jaren, coldly demanding that the uninvited guest leave the premises immediately.
In a stylized chibi form, Heine stubbornly refuses Ruru's plea to release her from his tight grip.
Ruru looks visibly flustered and confused as Heine continues to hold her close without any explanation.
Jaren remains silent, his mouth set in a grim line as he processes the scene before him. A gloved hand reaches out and firmly grabs Heine's shoulder to physically intervene in the situation.
Jaren forcefully pulls Heine away, accusing him of making the blonde attendant feel uncomfortable and distressed.
Annoyed by the interference, Heine swiftly swats the other knight's hand away with a sharp movement. Heine arrogantly declares his current authority over Ruru while mocking Jaren for being a pathetic, clingy man. Jaren's face contorts with shock and mounting fury at the white-haired knight's provocative and insulting words.
Hein casually challenges the dark-haired knight to a duel, expressing a long-standing desire to fight him.
With a stern expression, Jaren accepts the challenge, noting that combat would be faster than further arguing.
Ruru frantically jumps between the two men, desperately shouting for them to stop their reckless confrontation.
The blonde attendant warns them that a duel between legendary knights could result in someone's tragic death. Turning her attention first to Heine, Ruru points an accusatory finger at him with a serious expression.
Ruru sternly scolds her master for his constant habit of needlessly provoking others into violent conflicts.
The energetic maid then turns her focus toward Jaren, addressing him with the same level of intensity.
Ruru advises Jaren not to be swayed by the insults while he offers a humble apology.
A close-up reveals a faint blush on Jaren's face as he reacts to Ruru's direct and honest words.
Softening her tone, Ruru expresses her sincere gratitude to Jaren for his genuine concern regarding her safety.
With a gentle but firm request, the blonde girl asks Jaren to leave the room peacefully for now. Jaren looks taken aback and blushes more deeply as he agrees to follow her polite suggestion.
The dark-haired knight apologizes for causing a disturbance and begins his retreat from the room.
As he walks toward the door, Jaren looks back one last time and softly whispers the girl's name.
Ruru stands paralyzed with surprise as Hein looms behind her, watching the other man's departure.
Jaren reflects on the fact that he is no longer her master, yet he still feels responsibility. A hazy flashback depicts Jaren's past promise to Ruru to help her whenever she faces serious trouble.
Ruru's eyes sparkle with a sudden realization or emotional shift as she contemplates the knight's kindness.
With a bright and determined shout, the blonde girl confirms her understanding of Jaren's noble intentions.
Jaren offers a small relieved smile before finally exiting through the large ornate double doors.
Hein remains silent, his gaze fixed on Ruru as the atmosphere in the room begins to settle.
Watching him go, Ruru thinks to herself about how unexpectedly kind and considerate Jaren truly is.
Shaking off the distraction, Ruru resolves to return to her primary mission of investigating Hein's secrets.
Ruru asks Hein to continue his previous story, but the knight plays dumb with a confused expression.
The blonde attendant mentions the specific day of the previous saint's passing to jog his memory.
Hein leans back and asks the girl if she truly wants to know the secret behind his panic.
A close-up focuses on Heine's sharp eye as he observes Ruru's reaction with intense scrutiny.
The two characters stand in the center of the grand room, the distance between them filled with tension.
Suddenly losing interest, Heine yawns and dismissively tells Ruru that he is no longer in the mood.
Proclaiming his sleepiness, Heine walks away and gives a casual goodnight, leaving Ruru in shocked silence.
Chibi versions of Jaren and Heine represent the complicated personalities Ruru must deal with daily.
Ruru holds her head in frustration, lamenting the missed opportunity to gain valuable information from her master.
Sunlight filters through the trees outside the Grand Villa as a new day begins after the exhausting events.
Ruru lies spread eagle on her bed, letting out a heavy sigh as she recovers from the prior night.
She recalls how she had to agree to a date next week to appease a sulking Heine.
A small magical creature comforts the blonde girl while she reflects on her increasingly complicated living situation.
Ruru stares into space, her mind returning to the dark possibility of Heine being the saint's killer.
Stylized imagery shows Heine surrounded by dark hands, suggesting he may be a victim of a larger plot.
Ruru concludes that the more she learns about Heine, the less the rumors of his villainy fit.
Ruru contemplates how Heine's current complicated situation feels exactly like the circumstances Jaren faced.
The blonde girl thinks to herself that she genuinely doesn't want Heine to be the killer.
A blue pendant floats over a bloody background as Ruru questions the mastermind's ultimate goals.
Ruru wonders what the point was of killing her and stealing her precious blue pendant.
The small pink magical creature looks up with curiosity as it hears something at the door. The creature leaps toward the door as Ruru asks what is wrong with its sudden movement.
Ruru peeks cautiously around the bedroom door with the small magical creature perched on her head.
A man with long silver hair and a beauty mark beneath his eyes stands waiting solemnly.
Ruru is shocked to see the man and identifies him with a shout as Lord Sinicus.
Lord Sinicus apologizes for the early hour but insists he has something urgent to tell her.
The blonde girl quickly invites the nobleman inside her room so they can talk in private.
Noticing his grim expression, Ruru asks the man what on earth has happened to cause this.
Lord Sinicus looks down with a somber expression as he prepares to share his findings. The nobleman begins to explain his discovery regarding the woman who was Heine's previous attendant.
Ruru recalls that this woman was the one who framed Jaren and that Sinicus was investigating.
He notes that other staff members don't remember her well because she served during a chaotic time.
The blonde girl looks up with concern and asks if he actually found out any information.
A close-up of the nobleman's eye reveals a pained look as he delivers the heavy news. Lord Sinicus delivers a blunt and tragic update, revealing that the woman in question has died.
Ruru stares with wide, trembling eyes as she struggles to process the sudden news of death.
The silver-haired man clarifies his statement, indicating that the death was far more sinister than natural.
Against a backdrop of blood, Sinicus confirms that the former attendant was actually murdered by someone.
Horrified by the revelation, the blonde girl repeats the word in a daze of pure shock.
The two characters stand together in the large room as a heavy, mournful silence falls between them.
Sinicus explains that he questioned a coachman who drove the attendant toward the countryside after she quit.
The coachman reported that the girl vanished while he was resting the horses in the dark forest.
Lord Sinicus asks for clarification on the disappearance, and the driver confirms it happened while he walked away.
The driver recalls that she claimed to have a big payout but ended up freeloading without paying.
Looking solemn, the silver-haired nobleman prepares to explain the final part of his grim discovery.
He reveals that after hiring a patrol to search, they found the girl's body in a lake.
Sinicus theorizes that the mastermind hired her with money and then silenced her after she outlived usefulness.
The man notes it is unlikely the mastermind committed the act personally, using an intermediary instead.
Ruru finds the news awful as she imagines the woman being carried off to her tragic end.
Cynicus warns that they must now rely on Ruru's investigation since the primary lead is gone.
Clutching her chest with a determined look, Ruru prepares to face the dangers of her mission.
Lord Cynicus closes his eyes and warns the blonde girl to be more careful than ever before.
He reminds her that she must never allow her identity as the former saint to be exposed. Ruru offers a serious and focused nod as she confirms her understanding of the grave situation.
The scene shifts to a bright morning outside the villa where laundry hangs on a line.
Ruru resolves to make her killer apologize and bring the heartless mastermind to justice for their crimes.
In a chibi form, Ruru humorously wonders what kind of pain she should inflict on the villains. As Ruru hangs the laundry, a sudden blur of motion speeds toward her from the background. A loud and energetic voice suddenly calls out the girl's name, startling her from her thoughts.
Heine lunges forward and catches the blonde girl in a sudden, playful hug from behind.
Hein proudly brags that he woke up on his own, and Ruru offers her enthusiastic praise.
The master asks if she is proud, and Ruru encourages his step toward a healthier lifestyle.
Hein stretches and asks where they should go for their date tomorrow to avoid oversleeping.
Surprised by the sudden mention of a romantic outing, Ruru stammers the word date in confusion.
Heine reminds her that they had already promised to go out together, prompting her realization.
Please provide the text you would like me to read.
Ruru remembers she only agreed to a date to pacify Heine's jealous sulking over Jaren.
The blonde maid feels flustered and tries to dismiss the romantic weight of a gate. While Ruru recalls childhood memories with Jaren, the villa staff suddenly interrupts the pair.
The butler and maids enthusiastically declare that their outing is definitely a romantic date.
The bespectacled butler explains the staff's plan to keep Ruru at the white-haired master's side.
The staff transitions into full fan mode, waving light sticks and cheering for the couple's romance.
Chibi Ruru stands exasperated as the villa staff becomes overexcited about her and Heine.
The maids insist on taking over all date preparations, including coordinating the couple's outfits.
Hein is thrilled by the idea of matching colors and showing off to his rival.
Ruru feels overwhelmed as the staff plots to use the date to provoke Duran. The energetic villa employees continue their boisterous support while the chibi maid remains totally stunned.
A bright morning transitions to Ruru standing in her new, elegantly tailored date attire.
The maids proudly admire their work while Ruru offers a nervous and polite thank you. The blonde girl protests that the staff's efforts might have been a bit too excessive.
Ruru recalls the nobleman's warning and ensures her clothing properly conceals the saint's mark.
Heine surprises Ruru by peeking through the curtains as she finishes preparing for their outing.
The white-haired knight steps out, looking very handsome in his stylish, matching formal date outfit.
Ruru blushes and covers her mouth, silently admitting that her master looks incredibly attractive.
A close-up highlights Heine's charming smile and radiant aura as he admires his date.
In a chibi form, Ruru humorously questions if knightly selection is based solely on handsomeness.
Heine reaches out and takes the blonde girl's hand, leading her toward the villa's exit. The master's sudden gaze makes Ruru flinch as they prepare to leave for the day.
The bespectacled butler offers a polite farewell as the couple begins their journey outside.
Heine energetically pulls Ruru along, announcing their departure while she struggles to keep pace. The grand double doors of the villa stand closed after the pair has officially left.
Heine continues to hold Ruru's hand firmly as they navigate the mansion's opulent interior.
Ruru asks about their destination, while Heine remains mysterious and thoughtful about the location.
The blonde girl looks up at her master with a curious and slightly confused expression.
Hein leans in close and promises to take her to a truly wonderful and special place.
The scene shifts to a bright, crowded town square where commoners are going about their day.
Heine considers the various treats on display and asks Ruru which ones she wants.
Ruru stammers that anything is fine, while Heine remains intensely focused on his selection.
To the shopkeeper's delight, Heine orders 2 of every single item available for the girl.
Chibi Ruru is completely flabbergasted by her master's decision to buy the entire shop's stock.
Heine dismisses her concerns, explaining he will send the leftover sweets back to the palace.
Ruru laughs sheepishly, noting that Heine has missed the entire point of her being surprised.
The girl thinks back to Heine's promise and wonders about his idea of a special place.
A text panel confirms that the much-hyped special place is actually a local cookie shop.
A decorative banner identifies the shop as a nationally famous and beloved confectionery store.
A close-up of Ruru's eye reveals her observing Heine's genuine and childlike happiness.
Hein smiles blissfully while cradling a large bag of freshly baked homemade cookies in his arms.
The couple walks together while a mysterious cloaked figure watches them from a distance.
Heine mentions that he knows cookies are Ruru's favorite among all kinds of sweet treats.
Ruru remembers watching the knight eat these same cookies back when she served as saint.
Hein confesses his love for cookies, noting they were given to him for who he is.
The master laughs and pulls Ruru along while she questions the meaning of his words.
The 2 characters hold hands and walk briskly through the sunny streets with their shopping bags.
Ruru and Heine enjoy an enormous, elaborate chocolate parfait together at a bright cafe table.
Hein offers his companion a colorful macaron, though Ruru feels overwhelmed by the large amount. The date continues with Heine eating a massive ice cream cone while Ruru watches in amazement.
Heine excitedly suggests getting cake next, while Ruru follows behind him with a visibly overwhelmed expression. The blonde maid mentally pleads for mercy, feeling terrified by the relentless onslaught of sweet treats.
Noticing her hesitation, the white-haired knight stops in his tracks and looks back with a worried glance.
Heine asks Ruru directly if she actually dislikes sweets, leaning in close with a concerned and questioning look.
He recalls the villa maids promising him that a dessert course was the ultimate way to please any girl.
Ruru quickly shouts a reassurance that she truly loves sweets, blushing as she tries to salvage the mood.
The girl sheepishly admits there is a limit to her appetite as they walk through the busy town square.
Heine reaches into his pocket with a mischievous grin, telling her that he has the perfect solution ready. The white-haired master instructs Ruru to open her mouth, catching the blonde maid completely off guard.
Heine gently feeds the girl a small treat, his fingers lingering near her face in an intimate gesture. Ruru accepts the treat and looks surprised as she begins to process the unexpected flavor on her tongue.
A text panel explains that the treat is not sweet at all, but instead feels cool and refreshing.
Heine winks and reveals it is a mint-flavored candy, asking if she finally feels refreshed after the sugar.
The blonde girl stands in a daze, overwhelmed by her master's sudden kindness and the candy's cooling effect.
Heine playfully pokes Ruru's cheek with a finger, snapping her out of her stunned silence with a smile.
The master reminds the girl that this is their date and she needs to enjoy herself as well.
Ruru blushes intensely as she stares at her master, struggling to find words after his charming and direct approach.
Heine takes her hand again and promises to take her anywhere she wants to go for the next stop.
Stuttering with surprise, the blonde girl begins to suggest a new destination for the remainder of their outing.
The scene shifts to a colorful toy store display featuring a large blue cart filled with model houses. Ruru stops in front of the store, confirming her interest in exploring the variety of toys on display.
Heine finds the choice unexpected, while Ruru thinks about sending gifts to the children at the distant orphanage.
The girl's expression turns somber as she wonders if the children back in the countryside are doing well.
Heine watches his companion closely, noticing the sudden sadness that has clouded her face while she looks down.
The white-haired knight calls out to Ruru and tells her to look at him and draw her attention back. Heine wears a ridiculous pair of joke glasses with a fake nose and mustache to surprise her.
Ruru bursts into genuine laughter, and Heine celebrates his success in finally making her smile again. The master smiles warmly and admits that his only goal for the moment was to see her happy. Wiping a tear of joy, Ruru realizes that Heine is a far kinder person than she initially thought.
The two characters share a lighthearted and happy moment together inside the warm atmosphere of the toy store. The scene transitions to a beautiful pink and orange evening sky as their long date nears its end.
Ruru reflects on how incredibly fast the day went by while she stands alone on the street corner.
In a chibi form, Ruru waits outside while Heine agonizes over which souvenir cake to buy for others.
She is touched to see Heine worrying so much about bringing back gifts for the other villa attendants.
Ruru offers a gentle smile, noting how much her master has bonded with the staff during their time together.
Her attention is suddenly caught by a pink-haired girl in a black dress standing in the distance.
A close-up reveals the girl is Erica, the Saint Cadet, who looks visibly upset and determined.
Ruru recognizes her former rival and questions what the noble girl could be doing out so late.
The evening sky deepens in color as the scene focuses on the mysterious encounter in the town.
Ruru watches from the shadows, feeling a sense of impending trouble as she observes the pink-haired girl.
Erica is joined by two other cadets who appear to be pressuring her while they stand under an archway.
The two girls insist on staying out later, ignoring the fact that it is quickly getting dark outside.
Erica nervously argues that they should head back to the palace before they get into serious trouble.
One of the cadets dismisses her fear, claiming the future saint doesn't need to worry about simple rules.
The girl laughs and reminds Erica that her powerful father will easily cover for any of their mistakes.
Ruru watches as the cadets praise Erica's family status while the pink-haired girl remains quiet and troubled.
The blonde maid realizes that Erica is being exploited by her companions rather than leading their group. Ruru narrows her eyes with focus as she begins to understand the true dynamic between the saint cadets. She recalls the shadowy ringleaders who bullied her in the past and suspects they are still active. Erica suddenly shouts a panicked refusal at the two girls as the confrontation in the street intensifies. The pink-haired girl looks down with a saddened and deeply troubled expression.
She reflects on how her father has behaved strangely since the former saint's death.
Hidden in the shadows, Ruru reacts with confusion to the girl's mysterious words.
A massive, terrifying wolf monster with glowing red eyes suddenly emerges from the darkness.
The girls are frozen in terror as the beast looms over them in the street.
The monstrous wolf howls fiercely while the cadets scream and panic at its appearance.
Abandoning Erica, the two selfish cadets flee the scene while carrying their shopping bags. Ruru is knocked aside by the fleeing girls as she watches the scene in shock.
The blonde maid is horrified that Erica's companions would leave her behind to die.
Ruru frantically searches the immediate area to locate Erica before the monster can strike.
Paralyzed by fear, Erica whimpers as the giant predator corners her against the wall.
The pink-haired girl cowers in the shadow of the snarling beast, unable to move.
Erica trembles and weeps, pleading for someone to save her from the approaching monster.
A firm hand suddenly reaches out and grabs Erica's wrist to pull her away.
Ruru commands Erika to run as she drags the panicked girl away from danger.
Looking back in disbelief, Erika recognizes the person who has come to her rescue.
The ferocious wolf monster relentlessly pursues the two girls through the narrow town streets. Panic spreads as citizens scream warnings and flee into nearby buildings for safety. Fruit spills across the cobblestones as the chase continues through the chaotic town square. Erika trips and falls to the ground while Ruru looks back in great alarm. Ruru urgently checks on the fallen girl while the monster rapidly closes the discus. The beast lunges forward with open jaws, intending to crush the defenseless girls beneath it. Ruru heroically shields the terrified Erika, closing her eyes and bracing for the impact.
A sudden flash of steel cuts through the air, drenching the street in monster blood.
Heinz stands over them with a bloody sword, complaining that his date was interrupted.
The white-haired master looks down at the defeated beast with a calm and icy gaze.
Ruru looks up at her master with immense relief, calling out his name in joy. Erika falls to her knees and tearfully thanks Haina for saving her life once more.
In a chibi form, Ruru questions where Haina managed to find such a large sword.
Hein explains he traded his souvenir cakes for the sword at a local weapon shop.
Ruru expresses her gratitude that he is safe and notes the city's minimal damage. Their relief is short-lived as another massive wolf monster emerges directly behind the knight.
The second beast lunges forward with a deafening roar, catching the group by surprise. Hein barely blocks the attack, but the impact forces him to struggle against the beast.
Haina realizes the borrowed sword is too low quality to endure the monster's thick hide.
A close-up of Haina's eye reveals his growing battle lust as he focuses on the enemy.
The cheap blade shatters into pieces upon impact with the wolf monster's powerful skull.
Hein stares in shock as the sword breaks, leaving him vulnerable to the beast's jaws. The master mocks the shoddy weapon as the monster prepares to deliver a fatal bait.
Ruru screams her master's name in pure terror as she watches him being overtaken.
The scene freezes on Ruru's horrified face as she witnesses the unfolding disaster before her.
The wolf monster pins Haina to the ground, blood spraying as its fangs sink in.
Hein grunts in pain while trying to hold back the beast with his bare hands.
Using the broken blade's jagged edge, Haina stops upward into the monster's soft underbelly.
Despite his injuries, Haina wears a wild and defiant grin as he fights for survival. The knight delivers a powerful finishing blow with the remains of his shattered weapon.
The massive creature lets out a final agonizing roar before collapsing onto the street.
The broken, bloody hilt of the sword lies abandoned on the ground after the battle. Covered in blood, Haina kneels on the pavement while Ruru rushes toward his side.
A promotional image features a chibi Ruru diligently cleaning with a broom and bucket.
Ruru expresses her genuine awe as she witnesses the outcome of her master's intense struggle.
Hein lies severely wounded on the pavement, reflecting on his unlikely victory against the beast.
Ruru rushes to Haina's side with desperate concern, frantically checking the extent of his injuries.
Haina weakly calls out the blonde girl's name while struggling to remain conscious in her arms.
The white-haired master suddenly loses consciousness and slumps against Ruru, catching her completely by surprise.
Haina realizes his blood loss is critical while Ruru commands him to focus on reaching safety.
Haina's vision begins to blur as he fights a losing battle against his heavy exhaustion. In his dazed state, Haina notes that Ruru's pleasant scent persists despite the overwhelming metallic smell.
Ruru urgently instructs Erika to find professional help while the noble girl quickly agrees to flee.
Darkness finally overtakes the white-haired knight as he succumbs to his severe wounds and loses consciousness.
Narrative text explains that the noble Lancia family prioritizes martial skill and sword talent above all.
Haina recounts how his father once held a prestigious position serving as a holy saint's guardian.
Although the family expected the eldest son to succeed, Haina was the one born gifted.
The scene shifts to a memory of intense training sessions between two brothers during youth. A young Haina stands victorious after easily outmatching his older brother during a wooden sword duel.
The older brother offers a cheerful smile and playful wink despite being defeated by his sibling. Hein looks up with a humble and innocent expression, appreciative of his older brother's kind reaction.
The black-haired boy enthusiastically calls for another match while young Haina seems hesitant to continue.
Hein reminds his brother of a prior agreement regarding sweets as a reward for their training.
The older brother laughs at Haina's persistent sweet tooth and recalls their trip to the capital.
The elder brother admits he is the only one who bypasses their parents' strict dietary rules.
The older brother gently pats Haina's head, noting how much their parents value his innate talent.
Haina reflects on the positive traits of his brother, describing him as diligent and genuinely kind.
The elder brother provides a secret gift, acknowledging Haina as a person rather than just a weapon. A dark thought bubble echoes a cruel sentiment, questioning if Haina is inherently a nuisance.
Other noble children resentfully gossip about Haina's superiority and perceived arrogance during their youth.
The gossipers complain that Haina steals the attention despite his position as a younger son.
Haina dismisses the insults of others, finding comfort in the bond he shares with his brother.
Hein admits that his family's reputation mattered far less to him than his brother's affection.
A sudden realization begins to cloud the memory as Haina looks back on his past blindness.
The memory fractures as Haina confesses his failure to understand the true emotions of those around him.
A somber transition shows the brother standing alone in the rain during a moment of isolation.
Hein excitedly approaches his brother with another secret purchase, unaware of the tension in the air.
Hein offers to share new treats with his sibling, hoping for another happy moment together.
An abrupt and jarring sensation interrupts the memory, signifying a sudden break in their relationship.
The bag drops and treats scatter across the floor as Heine's brother coldly turns his back. The elder brother speaks with a grim expression, relaying a heavy decision made by their father. The brother reveals that Heine has been chosen for a prestigious role the elder brother wanted.
The brother looks at his own trembling hand, devastated by their father's rejection of his skills.
Hein desperately tries to reject the honor, claiming he would rather live a simple, lazy life.
The elder brother reacts with bitter resentment, feeling insulted by Heine's casual dismissal of his dream.
Heine is shocked as he finally realizes the depth of his brother's growing hatred and pain.
The older brother admits that Heine's humility only makes his own failure feel more humiliating.
A bittersweet thought reveals the brother's original intention to be a supportive sibling. The elder brother breaks down in tears, admitting he can no longer bear living in Heine's shadow.
The black-haired boy expresses the intense pressure and suffocation caused by Heine's effortless genius.
The brothers stand divided as the elder offers a final, hollow apology for his resentment.
The brother walks away from the scattered cookies, severing their once close bond forever.
Young Hein is left isolated in the cold hallway, staring at the space his brother occupied. Narrative text concludes the flashback explaining Hein's eventual path to becoming a legendary knight. Heine reflects on the years that have passed since he last saw his brother's face. Heine acknowledges that his presence alone pushed his brother toward a state of total despair. The young knight skillfully maneuvers through combat, striking down his opponents with calculated, fluid movements. Hein confesses his uncertainty regarding his past choices and his doubt about finding a resolution. Finding introspection burdensome, Heine decides that remaining focused on combat is his only viable path.
A brief, lingering thought surfaces, indicating that he still carries a piece of his past.
A nostalgic vision shows the two brothers laughing together while sharing a bag of treats.
Hein calls out to Ruru as she appears before him in a radiant, dreamlike vision.
Hein compares Ruru's sincere and earnest personality to the traits he once admired in his brother.
Moments of shared joy and frustration between the knight and the maid flash through his mind.
Heine admits to himself that he is deeply afraid of losing Ruru's respect and affection.
The knight watches Ruru's radiant laughter and realizes he truly wants her to like him.
Hein expresses his confusion regarding his own emotions and asks Ruru to help him understand. Falling through a void of feathers, Heine seeks the name for his new, blossoming feelings.
A chibi Ruru holds her broom tightly while reacting with shock to an unseen event.
The cleaning scene concludes with a message regarding the story's ongoing serialization and update notifications.